You could stand with me as we do the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The board met for an informational session on April 20th, immediately following the Education and Programs Policy, Personnel, and Legal Committee meeting for the sole purpose of collecting information and educating the board about legal implications for policy development. The board also met this evening to discuss a personnel matter, two legal and contractual matters. Can I please have a motion to approve the agenda for this evening?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Donato. Can I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Wagner, for the second. All in favor? Motion carries 8-0. I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the following minutes as presented from board meeting held on April 11th, April 20th, and the Buildings and Grounds meeting on the 25th.
So moved. All second.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan, for the motion. Thank you, Mr. Donato, for the second. All in favor? Motion carries 8-0. Thank you. Mr. Bormisky.
Thank you, Mr. Barr. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Before we begin, I just want to share a few things. First and foremost, I appreciate everyone coming out tonight. I do know that typically we would have more room in here, but due to the 4A, we've invited staff members who are here tonight, our teachers, principals who will be engaging with our school board. So we had seats for them. They are certainly welcome to stay after that portion of the meeting, but if they do leave, other individuals can certainly fill in. We do know that took up a lot of space, but we're working on an ELA elementary program, so that's why we felt it was important for them to be here. We also have members of our student council here tonight, as well as other students who are joining us, and we wanted them to have the opportunity to be part of the meeting as well. So we do ask all members of the audience just to be mindful of a few things. This is a public meeting. Through the public meeting, we need to make sure that the board is able to do their job. And what that means is there cannot be the interaction between the audience and the board except when public comment is taking place. That time is for members of the community to speak to the board. But during the meeting itself, we do ask that you remain quiet and that if you have any posters, placards, or any signs, they are not permitted per policy to be in here during the meeting. So if you do have those, we do ask that they please have them go out of the boardroom. They cannot be up at any point. So I do want to just reiterate that. If at any time during the meeting, we do need to take a break or a recess because of things that are going on, Mr. Bard will recess for us and we will then take a break, address what we need to address and come back. We do appreciate having members of our community here for the public meeting, and we thank you for giving us the time to be able to do the work, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us here tonight. With our students here, it's a great opportunity to show how individuals in our community can come together in a respectful and civil meeting to be able to do the business of the school district. So thank you all for being here. Tonight, from a recognition standpoint, I want to begin. We had recently our Black Knight Awards dinner and district retiree dinner. And so we provided for our public the list of all of our Black Knight Award recipients, as well as all of our staff members who are retiring at the end of this school year. And I want to highlight a few things around the Black Knight Award first before I get to the retirees. I do want to thank Ms. Irwin Bass, Mrs. Hall, Ms. Fisher, who is not here this evening, the three of them really collaborated together to organize this event, and I sincerely publicly thank you. It was a truly wonderful evening. We started the Black Knight Award recognition last year, and we felt it was important for staff to be able to recognize other staff for the hard work and dedication that they show. And we called it the Black Knight Award because as we were doing some research around why is Hempfield called the Black Knights? And we've shared this story a couple times, but since we have a great audience tonight, I want to be able to share it with you. So the name of the Black Knights was selected for two reasons. We had an individual by the name of Ken Bowers in the class of 1955. And Ken was really infatuated with the U.S. military. And the U.S. military at the time up at West Point was the pinnacle of college football. And they, with a winning record in the early 50s, and a New York sports writer dubbed them the Black Knights of the Hudson. And he really felt like at that time, when the superintendent of the district asked the students to come up with a name or a mascot of the district, he felt it was important to bring that to the students at that time, because he felt that more importantly than winning, the U.S. Military Academy, the Black Knights on the Hudson, he always thought they won with class. And he felt that that's what Hempfield, that he experienced in 1955, exhibited with his peers. And so after the vote, that's how Hempfield became the Black Knights. Winning is great, but it isn't about the winning, it's how you show up. It's the pride that you have for one another, the pride for the district. And the Black Knight Award to us really exemplifies the qualities of winning with class and that pride and humility. So what we did is we asked staff members to recognize other staff members and submit nominations. And so this past year, I believe we had over 140 nominations from across the district. And so we had members of our teaching staff, members of our support staff, substitutes, and we were able to recognize them at a dinner. And so our board and the community can access that through board docs. It was a wonderful evening. And also then from a retirement standpoint, we were able to spend time talking about the major contributions of all of the individuals who are retiring with the district. And if I recall correctly, I think collectively all of the retirees have something like over 400 years of service, 500 years of service to the district. And that really speaks volumes. And we wanted to be able to recognize those staff members. So again, you can access board docs, see those individuals. We had a wonderful evening, and I just wanted to share that and be able to recognize those individuals here publicly for that wonderful opportunity. Also tonight, we are here with our student council. So I'd like to turn it over to our student council to provide our monthly update. McGuire.
Good evening, everyone. My name is McGuire Eunice, and I have the pleasure of serving as the president for the HHS Student Council this year. Tonight, we are here as customary in the May school board meeting to give a review upon our years. So I'm going to invite our selected candidates to speak on what we did this year.
Good evening, everyone. To begin, we would like to thank the board for a very successful school year for Student Council. We appreciate the support and encouragement we receive from all of you. And as Student Council annually does, we will provide you a brief overview of how our year went.
In the fall, Student Council stayed pretty busy. We hosted the King and Queen ceremonies.
Sorry, could you speak up a bit, please?
We hosted the King and Queen ceremonies at Powder Puff and Homecoming, respectively. And additionally, we hosted the fall fling and a grill out afterwards.
We're going to switch mics here real quick.
Yeah, and then could you do your report again, because we didn't hear any of that?
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's all you're going to get.
Should I start from the beginning? Okay. So to begin, we would like to thank the board for a very successful school year for Student Council. We appreciate the support and encouragement we received from all of you. As Student Council does annually, we will provide a brief overview of how our year went. In the fall, Student Council stayed pretty busy. We hosted the King and Queen ceremonies at Powder Puff and Homecoming, respectively. And additionally, we hosted the fall fling and a grill out afterwards. In the late fall, Student Council started to prepare for the variety show. We prepared our baskets for the raffle fundraiser we held during the show. Our show was very successful, and we raised several $1,000s that we put inside of our emergency fund, which helps community members in need.
In the spring, we held the spring shebang, handing out free scoops ice to everyone after school. As always, we held 2 food drives, one in the fall and the other in the spring. We helped out with both of the back to school nights at the high school, and we met with Mr. Vermeerski regularly throughout the school year.
Again, we would like to thank the board for all their support during the school year. We are all really appreciative of the opportunity to express our opinion and be advocates for our student body. Thank you so much. We also have one more thing that we would like to present for tonight.
In regard to the recent policy updates, the Hempfield Student Council is appreciative of the board involving us in the process of policy 108.1 and 109 and the endless number of emails, meetings, and questions. Hempfield has always taught us to craft our own opinions and to be active members in our community.
And while we are disappointed that our education has become a political game in recent years, we will continue to be a voice for the Hempfield student body and fight for what we believe in. The club's opinion is if one book gets wrongfully removed from the shelves of our libraries, expect us back in larger numbers and voices. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you to Student Council. I have to say, I have the opportunity that I get to meet with all of you, through the school year, and I just always appreciate how you are strong advocates for each other, but also for the school district and the high school. And overwhelmingly, looking from last year to this year, one of the things that you really worked hard at this year was working with the high school administration on the culture and trying to find ways for the students to get reconnected with that reset, refocus idea to the high school. And I think you succeeded not only from the fall fling to the spring shebang, other opportunities to try and get students engaged. And I do thank you for all of that hard work. And it's been an absolute pleasure to be able to interact and get to work with you. And she does not know that I'm going to do this, but I am curious because we've been having this conversation, Rihanna, if you've made your decision with regards to your next steps after Hempfield. And I'm asking if you would be willing to share this because I think it's really important for the board to know what you're going to be doing.
So I did commit to my school last week, and I'm going to be going to Drexel for my undergrad, but I'm also accepted into the medical school as well. And so for the next 8 years, I'll be in Philadelphia and I'll be on track to become a physician. So yeah.
It's pretty amazing as a high school senior to be accepted into med school at this point in your life. And I wanted the board to know that because it's just one example. I mean, all of you, the seniors this year, the seniors in the past, you continue to rise above expectations and you continue to seek out opportunities for what you're interested and passionate in. And I just applaud you for that. And I think you set a phenomenal example for future classes that are coming up to keep working toward your dreams and don't give up. And I'm just so proud of you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mr. Brewerski, before we go on, just to add something, today I had the privilege of going over to high school, not to tour like I usually do, but I walked over because I was visiting Landisville Middle School with Mr. Brewerski, and the architecture firm was in there. And one of the comments, we've already hired them, so they don't have to say nice things to get in there. But one of the comments they made was how well behaved they were in the building, I think, for a fairly long time, and transitions and things going on. So this for Dr. Brossman and for the students there. You really have done a great job and turned things around, and thank you. I'm also going to put in a promotion just for something else, just because I think this is fantastic. The board already knows about this, but the indoor percussion group, they placed 5th in the nation at their competition a few weeks ago, and get in their, whatever their group is. And I think that's, that's tremendous. It's not, it gets competition from all over the country. And I think that's, something that should be recognized too with that. So again, thank you for all you've done this school year, and for the ones that are coming back, you'll continue to do.
And I'm sorry, I have a comment for Ms. Romani. That's an absolutely phenomenal accomplishment. And earlier in my career, I worked for Drexel, and I actually ran the parallel program that was the accelerated BSJV program. my office was right next door to the guy that run the program that you were just accepted into. So I was privileged to have a sort of ringside seat for just how elite that program is. So as someone who has some knowledge from the inside, that is an absolutely phenomenal accomplishment, and you and your family should be enormously proud.
Thank you.
All righty. Thank you to our student council for being here tonight. We're going to move on to the next item before residents' comments. And we are coming back with informational only to be able to provide updates regarding the elementary ELA pilot programs, as well as to address a few things specifically around board policy. So we're going to begin with the elementary ELA program. What I'm going to ask, and again, you're still welcome to be here, but we're going to kind of need to do a swap with our student council members who are here. And we have guests here from Great Minds as well as Savas, our elementary reading programs that we've been piloting. If you could just switch, and then you'll be able to come back. So we can have them come up to the table, Mr. Hoffman as well, so we can get that process going. You're welcome to stay, but if you need to go, that's fine as well. But I don't want anyone to feel like you have to leave. All right. And then at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Dandridge. And between Dr. Dandridge and Mr. Hoffman, they're going to begin. We do have staff members, between our teachers and principals who will be coming up as well. And then we'll be getting to our guests from the two companies that we've been working with over the last year. So we appreciate you being here as well tonight for us. Dr. Dandridge.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bremersky. As Mr. Graham's pulling this presentation up, we have three main reasons for this portion of the presentation. The first is to come back to the board and answer some of the questions that have come forward since the recommendation was made 2 weeks ago, to make sure that we can provide you the most amount of information so you can make an informed decision. The second was to provide an opportunity for our staff who have been involved in the pilot to come here and to talk to you directly and to answer questions that you may have so you can hear firsthand. We know it's a challenge with all the hours that you put in to get into the classroom, so we thought we'd bring them to you so you can engage and hear their experience working through the pilot. And finally, as a request from the last meeting, we have representatives here from Savas and from Great Minds to speak about the program, to share some of their talking points about implementing these reading programs in schools that they've worked with across Pennsylvania, and give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you would have of them. We recognize this is an important decision. It's a big decision. Certainly, you've probably seen the headlines with Senator Ahmet and his formation of this Education and Economic Development Commission, and he's been talking a lot about the importance of early literacy and getting our students reading at an early age to set them up for lifelong success. I can say I am extremely proud of the work that has gone into this pilot to help us choose a program to use with our staff and our students, especially Mr. Hoffman's leadership there, the work of our pilot teachers who have dove in and have been implementing this throughout the year, the work of our principals who have been observing and walking hand in hand with those teachers, our reading specialists, and all who have had a hand in implementing this pilot. It has really been one of the most thorough, transparent, and engaging processes that I've ever been a part of. And it's really exciting to see the result of their work. The great news here is we have two excellent programs. We've seen success in both of them throughout the year. We're really happy and pleased with the work that has gone on. What's really critical for us is to be able to bring a program forward for our staff and students to be able to use with our students going forward. So with that said, let me start in with some of the questions that have been raised over the past couple of weeks. First, there was a question about shipping costs and the price tag that was on the quotes when we presented a couple of weeks ago. What you can see from the chart there, that original quote that we had presented represented a 9% price tag for shipping and handling. For Savas, you can see the dollar amount. For Wit and Wisdom, you see the dollar amount. And we were asking, some were asking about why that seemed like a large number. Some of the clarifications that we received on that, first of all, it's a 6-year cost. So it is the price of shipping and handling for all 6 years to ship those consumables and those materials to the buildings. The materials were coming from multiple warehouses, multiple different locations. And it was also representing a fully guaranteed cost to us from warehouse to our district. They're guaranteeing any of the damage, any delays, things like that. They were not looking to make money on the shipping and handling costs. That just was the price to do that work. Since going back and talking with both companies have worked with us to reduce those costs down to 5%. So you'll see a little bit later in the presentation a reflected quote with some current numbers. You can see the shipping and handling costs have been reduced from 9% to 5% for both of those two companies. The next slide, another question was, especially with that 9%, can we provide shipping on our own? Can we contract out and do it cheaper? So Savas does have a provision in their contract to allow for a 2% handling option. If customers choose to do that, Wit and Wisdom has a 3% handling option to do that. Some of the drawbacks to contracting out that work on your own is you would be required to do that work all the 6 years. Each year will require pickup potentially from multiple locations to be able to bring those to the district. In addition, in that scenario, the materials are not guaranteed. Once they leave the warehouse, you are responsible for them. So if a pallet is, unboxed when we get back to the district and there are damaged materials in there, it no longer carries the guarantee that would be in the quote that was when they are doing the shipping for them. So just wanted to make sure you had the information because that was asked about shipping and handling. Next, I want to take, Mr. Bard.
Just to clarify, when it says multiple locations, does that mean the truck is making multiple stops to fill the or is it just obscure places all over that UPS goes to?
We have representatives here who probably can answer that directly. So, I mean, I can throw it to them to talk about how the different warehouses would operate.
Hi, I'm Carl from Great Minds, so Wit and Wisdom. Currently, we have one large sort center that it's a contract for us. Engage Learning does all of our picking, fulfillment, and then for the majority of our printed materials, they'll ship out of that warehouse. But with this program, a lot of what we call core texts or the books that are used are not our titles. And so often we have arrangements with different booksellers that have the copyright and the ability to sell them. And kind of we're at their mercy where their inventory is at, things like that. Pricing's pretty well set, but those core texts may come out of Baltimore. They may come out of a warehouse in Harrisonburg, Virginia, different bookseller, all kind of dependent on where we are in the cycle.
Okay.
So we're a smaller company and we don't have control over printing. We don't own it, warehousing, the fulfillment of orders and shipping, and especially so with the core text, with those titles that we don't own the copyrights to.
And before we move on, the other question I would have is one of the positives or explain positives is about who's responsible for how the product is delivered. Normally, the carrier is responsible. So if there was damage, the carrier is responsible for the freight claim generally. But you're saying that regardless of what the carrier is going to say or do, you're supporting that expense.
Yeah, that's correct. So if there's any damage or missing items, we're going to immediately rectify it and get you the right stuff. It's up to us then through Cengage and the carrier that they selected. It's just how our company works to kind of chase that.
I'm actually glad you went that direction. You mentioned a shortage. So that would still be on the shipper though, being shipped short.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, full chain of custody from packing at the warehouse to delivery at your sites, your schools or a central site, whatever it happens to be. Anything damaged, missing, whatever, we're gonna replace it.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Andy Brenner. I'm the Vice President, General Manager from Savage Learning. Thank you, board members, administrators, students, and community members for having us tonight. We appreciate that. For Savage, we have one main warehouse. It's in Indianapolis. So everything that will be shipped here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 will come from one warehouse. Just as Carl said, that we take responsibility from the warehouse into the school buildings for any of the materials that get shipped through from Savage Learning Company.
Okay, thank you.
Great. The next slide, there were some questions about ESSER dollars and how that money could be spent. We gave a little bit of an overview in one of the presentations, but I wanted to go a little bit further in depth there since there were some questions about what we can and cannot spend money on. So as we presented previously, the dollar amounts that Hempfield has received for ESSER 1, 2, and 3 are listed on the slide. ESSER 1 was 707,000 approximately. ESSER 2 was 3 million approximately, and ESSER 3 ARP ESSER was 6.1 million. The most important one up there in relation to this conversation would be in regards to ARP ESSER. And that's the highlight in blue there. There are two main requirements in ARP ESSER that we need to be aware of when spending these dollars. I'll do a quick overview on the first piece, and then on the second item, go a little bit further in depth. There is a 7% set aside on that 6.1 million. So for us, it comes out to 474,000 that must be spent in 3 areas. Those are identified as 5% on learning loss, 1% on summer enrichment, 1% on after school programs. We have a plan in place for most of those dollars, or are working through a plan for most of those dollars. You can kind of go in the weeds and see the breakdown of what that looks like for Hempfield in each of those areas. None of those there are really dollars that we're targeting towards the money that we would like to spend on the ELA program. Really, item number 2 there is the important piece to be aware of. 20% of that 6.1 million was required to be spent on learning loss. So what does that mean for us? So Hempfield's application that we have submitted and has been approved has designations for these evidence-based interventions, and I'll define that a little bit further on the next slide. We have been holding in the application $565,000 towards an ELA program. We've been holding $200,000 for 2 ELA coaches to help us with the implementation of an ELA program. We've been holding a little over $400,000 for decodable readers to complement an ELA program, and approximately $20,000 for math programming for 7th grade. So that's what's on our planning documents. Nothing is spent yet. Obviously, we've been working through the pilot, but this is what we have planned for in how to spend that 20%, which is designated for learning loss. The definition here for learning loss is up there, and it's codified in the 2001 E1 of the ARP Act of what that evidence-based interventions must look like. It must impact loss instruction over the pandemic. It must focus on student achievement, and it must be research-based. There are a couple of main ways that we can identify what that looks like. The one that they have published is using the What Works Clearinghouse. So there's a link out to there. You can see some of the interventions that were approved for ESSER dollars. And then many of the reports that we reviewed to go through the ELA pilot were then researched through Ed Reports. And again, there's a link out there to Ed Reports. And it talks about the programs that have been approved for ESSER dollars that are evidence-based based on their reporting. So Mr. Hoffman was really involved in the selection process. So I'm going to have him speak a little bit about what that looked like from the beginning of Ed programs to the selection of these 2 programs.
All right, so as you know, this has been about an 18-month process. We started by taking a look at Ed Reports and looking at the programs that met expectations, both with alignment and usability. So there were some questions about some of the other science of reading programs that are listed in a lot of research and were ones that we did not go through and investigate or look to pilot. One of them was bookworms. We did look at that. That's only a program for grades K to 5. So it would not have provided anything for our 6th grade. The American Reading Company, or ARC, is another program that's often cited as being science of reading based. They have their own proprietary assessment system called the ERLA. It basically would duplicate assessment systems that we already have in place. And it's also a very costly program. So as we were looking at the amount of funds that we needed to utilize in this purchase, the American Reading Company was extremely costly. On the next slide, you can see the 3 programs that we did look at more closely. Last January, we had representatives from all 3 of these companies come in and present to a group of teachers and administrators. From this list of 3, we then chose 2 to pilot. Amplify CKLA and ELA is a K-6 program. As teachers looked at this program and as we heard the presentation, there were some concerns about some of the content being appropriate for different grade levels. Specifically in 5th grade, they read A Midsummer Night's Dream. So a Shakespeare play in 5th grade seemed a little young for that. There were some second grade unit on the urinary system, which again seemed like not something we wanted in 2nd grade as the teachers were looking through those resources. The other piece with that program is a lot of the books are written for the program or rewritten for the program. And so while they are full text that you're reading, they are not actual novels like we found with Wit and Wisdom. It also has its own phonics and assessment system, which would mean that the current programs that we have all of our teachers trained in and are using would no longer be applicable. So not only that, but as we rated these programs, both that group who looked at them from the presentation standpoint, and when we took the materials to all 7 buildings and had our teachers examine them, it consistently ranked as the 3rd choice and was far behind the other 2. So the 2 programs we decided to pilot were My View and My Perspectives by Savas. My View is the K-5 version of that program, and then at 6th grade and up, it becomes My Perspectives. This program is aligned to the science of reading. It is the same company as the math program that we adopted last year, and also the same company that we use for our social studies in many of our elementary grades. It has a very robust online system with lots of resources. And one of the benefits to this that we saw was that our students and teachers would already be familiar with that online system. So it made sense to most of us that this was one of the 2 programs that we would continue to look at and investigate with the pilot. The other program that we looked at was Wit and Wisdom. It is again aligned to the science of reading. As I mentioned, and you know, this one uses a full novel or a full book approach. So instead of students reading selections of a book, they are reading the entire book. It is not a consumable student resource as My View and My Perspective is. It is an actual book that we would go to Barnes and Noble and buy that the students are using. Wit and Wisdom is also aligned with the current phonics program that we use, which is Foundations, and also aligned with the decodable text that we currently use in grades K-2 called Geodes. And I'll show you in a little bit later slide how all of that works together. One thing we did realize as we started researching Wit and Wisdom is that if you Google it, you will see there are some concerns out there about some of the content and some of the books. So as we looked more closely at that and looked at the text, what we discovered was a lot of those books are books that are already in our elementary school book rooms, books that teachers are already reading to their kids as read alouds or that students were reading from classroom libraries. So I'll talk a little bit more specifically about some of those concerns on a later slide with some of those specific titles. But when we looked at the books, looked at the actual content and looked at how they were used in the program, what we realized was that their use was really not controversial, that the way that it was being utilized in the classroom had a very intentional purpose to it. So one of the things that you've had some questions about is data. And one of the things that we talked about last time is in this day and age, data is an extremely difficult piece. The COVID pandemic created some gaps in years of testing, which is always difficult. It also created, especially in reading, some decreases in performance. And so looking at performance pre-COVID and post-COVID is very difficult to compare. So one of the things that the board asked about was, as we look at a lot of these research studies, they're from 2018 and 2019. Why is that? And as we met and talked with both companies, they were very upfront in saying the same thing that we hypothesized, and that is COVID. So they have pulled together some research for us, and they'll be sharing that with you later on this evening. But we did want to, on this slide, just show you that there is some research out there from some studies that were done prior to COVID. Savas has a field study and some other research on their website from 2018, 2019 that looks at how students in Illinois and Pennsylvania performed on pre-test and post-test from the Savas program. And then Wit and Wisdom again has some information from the 2018-19 school year from several schools, again, not in Pennsylvania, but utilizing state assessment data. It's difficult to compare that to the PSSA because they are different states and utilize different assessments. But it does give kind of an indication of what those districts saw with the implementation of the program, very similarly to the way the Savas research shows those schools' performance on the same type of assessment.
When you look at our data summary, there were some questions about data that have been presented recently. As a mathematician and teaching here in the high school, we did lessons on the validity of data and statistics and the ability of companies to use data to tell the story that they wanted to tell. I have been very hesitant all along to use any data point that we're collecting to make strong claims about any of the programs. What was important for me is the proof of concept that we were seeing the growth here in all of our programs. And that was what we saw. Data from Acadians and Exact Path did not favor one program over another. It did show growth in all of our programs, despite the fact that we were comparing our current model, which was in place for over 6 years, to 2 pilot programs that had been used in the classroom for only 3 months. We were able to see that our students were growing as they engaged with those tools, which was extremely important to us. It wasn't a statistically valid study. We didn't have, similar sample sizes. We didn't have a control group, anything like that. Yet of the 13 data points that we pulled, 10 of them actually showed that one of the pilot programs was stronger than our current curriculum. You can see the data points up there. Our current curriculum scored highest in 3 of the instances, Wit and Wisdom 4 times, Savas 6 times. I don't use that to say, let's rank and score that way. I use that to say, we were seeing growth in our programs that we were utilizing in the classroom, even with a short amount of time.
So there have been some questions about some of the material concerns. One of the questions that was brought up with Savas was, this is a consumable book, so we're not buying a hardcover textbook that we then have for multiple years. What happens if changes occur to stories, or do we have control over that? And what happens with the online component, since there is a huge online piece to that? One of the benefits of a consumable piece, and there's a consumable piece with both programs, is that if things change, we get the updated changes to that. Are the stories going to change? Likely not. However, if, organization or the structure of the text, the consumable book for the student changes, then we get those new texts. With Wit and Wisdom, as I mentioned, there were some commonly questioned texts. Walk Two Moons was one of them. That was brought up at a board meeting several weeks ago. That is part of the myth making unit in 4th grade. It's the 4th module. As we've been very upfront in sharing, with Wit and Wisdom, there are 4 modules. We will teach 1 module per trimester, which means we'll only be able to teach 3. In talking with other districts who have adopted this program and have implemented it, that's what they're able to accomplish in 1 year, is 3 units. And so since that's part of the 4th unit, that isn't a unit that we will get to. There are also some questions about some of the books in the Civil Rights Heroes unit. Again, with 2nd grade, our 2nd grade pilot teachers realized that a lot of the content from that unit is something that we are already covering in social studies. However, their 4th module on nutrition is not something that we cover, and was something that was highly motivating for kids. And so in 2nd grade, we will be using that 4th unit rather than that 3rd unit. The 2 titles that are in green are 2 titles from 1st grade, and those are books that we will be using as part of an implementation if you would approve Wit and Wisdom. The first one is Brave Irene, which is part of module 3. If you're not familiar with that story, that's, I think, a picture book that probably almost every kindergarten and first grade teacher has at one point read to their class in order to teach perseverance. So it's about a young girl who is tasked with delivering a package through a snowstorm. And as she continues on this journey, it gets colder, the snow gets deeper, it's snowing heavier and heavier and heavier. And at some point she decides, like, I just need to give up. However, on the next page, she bounds up out of the snow and continues on that journey. So it's really all about the perseverance that's involved. And that's how that book is used in that unit. The second book is Seahorse, the Shyest Fish in the Sea. That fits in the second module on creature features, where the students are studying all kinds of different animals and things that make those animals unique. So if you can imagine a bunch of first graders, 6-year-olds, and they're all about all of the different unique characteristics of animals. So the one piece that comes up as being controversial in this book, if you know about seahorses, is that the males actually carry the babies. So that's a cool fact. And really for 6-year-olds, that's what that is, a cool fact. And so some of the concerns about that book, we really have not seen. First graders just love learning not only about the seahorses, but all the other animals that are addressed within that unit. So again, those were some of the concerns that we had noted, as I initially mentioned earlier in the presentation, and just some of the specific titles and the way that we have looked at the concerns that have come up. The way those texts are used within the program really does not lend itself to some of those concerns.
So another thing that was asked was just an overview of the quotes that we received from both companies over time. So really, you have a breakdown here of both ESSER and district dollars, but on the right-hand column, you can see the evolution of the quotes there. From Savas, the initial quote was 1.54 million, which has been revised and stands today at 1.3 million. Wit and Wisdom started at 1.335 million and today stands at 1.249 million. So that is some of the negotiated costs for the reduction in material costs as shipping and handling, and other concessions that the companies have worked with us on. So those are where our final quotes are. You can see the breakdown of what we can spend on ESSER dollars today versus district dollars for a 6-year license. On the next slide, we'll take that final quote there for both companies and break it down a little bit further, see what savings were realized over time in both of those quotes, what the ESSER and district dollars, and then what the cost per pupil would be per year. So how much we're spending on our students for this ELA program throughout those 6 years. The last piece here before we turn it over to some of our staff was the question about whether we adopt now after a year of piloting these programs, or if it made sense to extend the pilot. So to answer some of those questions, if we were to adopt now tonight and implement next year in 23-24, we would be able to use those ARP ESSER dollars, that 1.22 million identified that we have targeted for an ELA program, to pay for year 1 of the program. So as you know, our ESSER is over in September of 2024. So we'd be able to pay for the first year of the program, and then we would use district funds to cover 2023 to 2029, the rest of those 6 years. We have that currently being held in the budget that we have presented at the latest finance meeting. You can see for Wit and Wisdom, that would be 726 and change, and for Savas 885 and change, or the cost there per year. If we were to extend the pilot and get another year of using it in the classrooms, potentially expand it to other classrooms, work to collect more district data, we would need to revise that district spending plan and what we are using those dollars on. We would use as much of the ARP ESSER funds as we could to pay for that extra year of the pilot. The approximate cost to the district of then an adoption of either program in 2024 to 2030, not factoring in any additional ESSER dollars, would be approximately 930,000 for Wit and Wisdom, approximately 1.3 million for Savas. One of the reasons that the Wit and Wisdom costs went down a little bit more than the Savas there is we'd be able to purchase the textbooks in that extended year of the pilot. So that would reduce some of the upfront costs there. So approximately $300,000 to $500,000 more. Now, we would also look to contract some of the coaching through the company in those cases. As a slight twist here, Mr. Bomersky did get word just this past week that we have been working with the state. They have gotten a clarification from legal that we will potentially be able to use our ARP ESSER funds to implement a program in the 24-25 school year, despite the fact that those funds run out in September 2024. We were pretty shocked by that answer from legal, but pleasantly shocked. So that will potentially influence those numbers a little bit. That was good news. But again, there will be a cost to the district there to delay. So,
Dr. Dendra, if I can just jump in on
Yeah.
that real quick. So the reason we were able to receive approval is as I was able to work back and forth with the Division of Federal Programs on this and talk through everything that we've done for the last 18 months, all the public meetings, public presentations, board meetings, community meetings. They took all of that information, and because of the transparency around this, they are supportive with the idea that a decision would need to be made if there was a decision to extend the pilot. We would have to make that decision and pay in the summer of 24 for the for the 6 years. But because we are piloting and we've been continuing down that path and continuing to be very upfront with everything, they will allow us to use those dollars for the program materials only for 24-25. And as Dr. Dandridge said, that is a change because just the week prior, that answer was no. And as we kept pushing, they heard the need to make sure that from a district standpoint and a board responsibility, that you are trying to make the best decision you can to use the dollars as wisely as you can. And so that's when they took it to legal, they're saying yes. And so we have that officially in writing because we would need that documentation when we get audited. I did use the word if we were to get audited when I was in my conversations, and I was quickly corrected and told, no, it's when you will get audited on your ESSER dollars. So having all of this information month after month after month and time again will be very critical for all this substantiating as to why we're doing what we're doing. So we were very pleased to get that information and we do have that secured and we will not lose that documentation.
no.
Hey Doug, question. Could you explain those 2 bullet points? So each one, there's an additional cost and then increase for waiting a year, 155,000 a year. Could you explain? I'm not sure I understand that.
So the cost is a 6-year cost. So it's the breakdown of what that would be over 6 years. Right. So
So we
if
pay an additional 155,000 per year more?
no, the total cost would be 930,000 for that and 1.3. All I'm doing there in the parentheses is breaking down what the per year cost would be for you. Okay.
Thank you.
There are a couple implications to extending the program that are not financial. I'll let Mr. Hoffman speak to some of them.
And some of these actually become financial, but they're more educational.
Sure.
With elementary ELA, if we delay that a year, that pushes that back in the curriculum cycle. Since our elementary teachers teach all subject areas, it is not fair to them to just push ELA back and keep everything else the same. That means that they are now, or would be, teaching new curriculum in 2 content areas in the same year. That is not a task that we can ask them to do. So that means that pushes the entire elementary curriculum cycle. That does a couple of things. The first one is that right now we have an extra implementation year with science before the state has a new science PSSA in the 2025-26 school year and is requiring schools to have curriculum in place that addresses the new science standards. Our current cycle has us implementing that in the 24-25 school year to give us 2 years to make sure that we are in good shape before that PSSA kicks in. Second piece of that is that the 6-year licenses we currently have with programs would then run out before we are ready to make new curricular decisions. So in the case of social studies, which has already been delayed because of COVID, we would need a 2-year extension. And with math, we would likely need an additional 1-year extension for the 6-year license that we currently have. So if we do not make an adoption and instead extend the pilot, there are some consequences that happen with additional areas of elementary curriculum as well as materials.
Mr. Hoffman, question with the new science standards right now, they get the PSSA science test in 4th and then in middle school and 8th grade. Is there any talk of expanding that it would be like math or ELA to all 3 through 8?
No, however, the new standards are written in a K-5 band and then a 6 to 8 band. So the 4th grade PSSA will actually be moving to 5th grade. But it will still just be done once in 5th grade and then once again in 8th.
But it is to trying to implement that stuff. As being a former elementary teacher, that is difficult. And one of the things, no matter what series is selected, there is training involved and the teachers are going to need that.
Correct. So to do training in 2 different subject areas in the same year and then attempting to implement those instructional changes would never be anything that I would consider asking our elementary teachers to do.
And as the board has heard from Mr. Bomerski and things, are professional development because of the requirements for other things. As an example, as you know, they just finished up the PSSA testing and there was training involved that I'm sure is still mandatory. It was a long time ago that they have to go through before they actually handed out on those given days to do that.
Correct.
And, you know, there are things that you just can't avoid doing that. So it would be better, at least in my thought, to continue on the cycle that we're currently on for the teachers, for the kids, and just my thoughts with it.
On the next slide, just one other piece to consider. I often hear the trifecta of literacy instruction, and it really focuses on phonics instruction, decodable text, which students can read based upon the phonics skills they've been taught, and then a knowledge building program that involves reading and writing. And so with both of these programs, we have those 3 components, which is a reason that we piloted these 2 programs. With Savas, those 3 pieces are built into their program, and you see that in each of the grade levels. With Wit and Wisdom, as we mentioned at the last meeting, there is not a phonics component. However, the phonics that aligns with Wit and Wisdom is Foundations. That's a program that all of our kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade teachers are currently using and currently are trained in. We also have the geodes, which are the decodable books that link Foundations to the Wit and Wisdom concepts.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hoffman. Silly question. What is a decodable book? What does that mean?
So, yeah, decodable books, as we take a look at connecting those 3 points to the triangle, a decodable book has words in it that students can read based upon the phonics skills that they've been taught.
So sounding it out.
Right. So instead of
sounding things out.
Correct. So instead of guessing based upon the picture clues, they are looking at the phonics or looking at the letters. They're putting those sounds together and sounding those words out. The piece with the geodes is that the geodes use the phonics skills taught in Foundations, but the content of those books lines up with the content in the texts in Wit and Wisdom. So the students not only have the phonics skills they need to read the text, but also have the background knowledge. And the geodes actually work both ways then in continuing to build that background knowledge with what they're reading in Wit and Wisdom. So with both of these programs, we have those 3 points of the triangle that are all connected and then make sense for students.
Thank you.
So as you saw 2 weeks ago, we did make a recommendation to adopt Wit and Wisdom. The bullet points that we spoke to last time are there on the slide. It complements programs that we currently have in place. Mr. Hoffman just spoke to that. We have seen a high level of rigor and scaffolds that will lead to success for all of our students. It has a strong written component, which is an area of need that we've identified. It's highly correlated to science of reading, structured literacy, and focused on all aspects of the PA ELA standards. We do have integration in all subject areas. One of the pieces that we really saw and enjoyed in the classroom was the students reading full texts, building that background knowledge. I think you'll hear from the teachers, there was an extremely high level of student engagement. That's what we saw as we walked around to the classroom. And we really saw students bringing forward their love of reading in a way that we haven't seen in our current model. And it would be a smooth transition to our middle school ELA. The additional considerations that we'd like you to consider is, our job is to bring a recommendation. We have two great programs here. Like I said at the beginning and the outset of this presentation, really proud of the work that the staff have done in both of these programs. Our staff deserves a program for to structure their ELA instruction. Our community and parents and guardians have asked for a program that has those consistent content and resources in every grade level across the district, no matter what building that you're in. Both these programs will allow us to do that. The cost of delay is partly financial, but also is on that curriculum cycle and having to make the adjustments. I'm especially sensitive to that with the new science standards coming online. So to be able to adopt tonight would allow us to allow the current curriculum cycle to continue, lessens that disruption. And we really do believe that this pilot has been as transparent as possible, has addressed the concerns that have come forward. We've taken time to go back, to bring representatives, to bring people to you to answer any things that you might have brought forward. And we've tried to share our eye test and what it looks like in the classroom. But like I said, sometimes that's hard to do, but it is really best when it's relayed by the staff that are using it directly. And that is the purpose of our staff members here today. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to any of the pilot teachers who would like to come up to speak about what went well, what potentially they might want to see change, why they chose one program over another, and then any questions that the board would have for any of those members.
Hi, how are you? Stephanie Fitzgerald, fourth grade teacher at Mountville. In one of the previous meetings, it was talked about the need to strengthen our writing scores here at Hempfield. So that's what I'm going to speak about tonight. It's so important to strengthen these writing scores because it helps to prepare our students for the on-demand writing tests that they have to do, like they take when they do the PSSAs. As a fourth grade teacher, one of the biggest challenges we have is preparing our fourth graders to write a text-dependent analysis. In the fourth grade, it is the first time that they have to write a multi-paragraph essay in response to a prompt that relates to a reading passage. And at the beginning of the year, that is always a really daunting task for us because our students come in the fourth grade with so many different abilities. I've had fourth graders who come in unable to write a sentence. I have some who are able to write a paragraph. So getting them to that end goal where they have to write a multi-paragraph essay can really be challenging. In previous years, without an ELA program, that has been extremely challenging for writing because I don't have the resources I need to teach them how to write a TDA properly. I use the Pennsylvania Department of Education website and I pull TDA prompts from there and I try to create my own. We collaborate with colleagues, but it is really challenging to get students to be able to do what they need to do without having an authentic reading and writing curriculum. It also seems disjointed when I'm trying to pull resources and I'm not looking at research-based methods like one that would come from a program. This year, I piloted the Wit and Wisdom program, and anybody who knows me knows that I have loved teaching this program throughout the course of this school year. I will tell everybody all about it. I invite so many people into my room just that they can get a taste of what my students have been able to experience this year. Within the Wit and Wisdom pilot, From the first module, my students have been given the opportunity to use an evidence organizer where they were planning out their writing. And I remember sending a message to Mr. Hoffman and Mrs. Wales, our reading specialist, in September or October saying, my students are using an evidence organizer just like the one that they would use for a TDA, and they don't even know it yet. So they were using authentic organizers and having writing experiences that were connected from their reading to their writing. We were debating and talking about topics so that students would be able to authentically write from the heart and from what they know. Wit and Wisdom is a knowledge-based program, so it gives students the opportunity to build their knowledge. And like I said, we have so many discussions about our reading where students are so invested in what they are reading and writing about. So their writing definitely improves over the course of the year. It also gives all students the ability to write about a common text, and it has brought us all so much closer together. I brought my big teacher bag of student writing examples, but I pulled out 2 examples to share with you tonight, because I think when you're looking at data and how students are growing over time, one of the best ways to do that is to look at how your students have grown over the course of the school year. So I've collected writing samples from the beginning of the year. And one of the ones I'd like to share with you tonight is from a student who came to me at the beginning of the year, struggling to write a sentence. And the writing that he did in this piece here, what I love about it is that he was trying to incorporate all of the writing techniques that we had been working on with a text we were reading called All Summer in a Day. We were focusing on how setting impacts a character. We were focusing on figurative language. We were looking at quotations and dialogue and using them appropriately. So many different writing techniques all within one piece. So if you'll just bear with me, I really wanted to read this with you tonight. This student was exploding the moment from a story where a little girl was locked in a closet, and he took his own spin on it. And really, it was fantastic to see what he did. It was raining outside again. I'm so tired of this rain. I look at my classmate named Margot. She's bragging about the sun. I scream, you don't remember the sun, you're lying. I was so jealous of Margot, so I locked her in a closet. Margot wept, please don't lock me in the closet, please, please. I could hear Margot banging on the door like a hurricane was in the closet. My classmates and I don't have to deal with her anymore, I thought. I could hear Margot weep. Let me out, please, please. My classmates and I were walking upstairs when the sun came out. We forgot about Margot like she was a dust of sand that blew away. So you can just see how much this student was soaking up everything that we were doing in the classroom and taking that and making it his own. This year, when my students took the PSSA, I noticed that they were utilizing their scratch paper like none other. And if you're a teacher, you know when you see your students using a lot of scratch paper during the PSSAs, then that means that they're trying out all of those techniques that you've been working with them on. I noticed that they were taking so much longer that they normally would in the past because they were taking everything that we had been modeling throughout the year and putting it to the test. I always tell them that before the PSSAs, it's like practice. We relate it to I'm their coach and we're going to practice. And then when the PSSAs come around, it's the game day and it's their turn to take everything that we've been working on and put it to the test. I couldn't be more proud of what my students did this year. It's really hard for me to look at data points and be able to see how much my students have grown when I look at exact path and Acadian scores, but I can't tell you enough how much growth I've seen from my writers and my readers because of having an ELA program. Having a program gives us the same resources for everyone across the district, but it also gives teachers research-based methods to deliver instruction that aligns with the writing demands that readers and writers are going to have to face. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Sorry in advance, I don't talk to adults very often, so. I'm Taylor Mahalik. I'm a third grade teacher at Centerville. And when the pilot teachers had come together to make a recommendation for an ELA program, I came ready to fight for Wit and Wisdom. And that's because of the investment that my kids have had with this program, that it became so much more than just an ELA program. My kids were requesting books from our school library all on their own about topics that were related to things that we were learning about. They were bringing in books from home that their parents had bought them outside of school that were related to topics. I had many families who had gotten STEM kits to build rockets at home because we had learned about the Apollo 11 mission. And that was just because of their excitement about the topics that we had been learning. So we're learning these reading and writing skills, but a lot of it is through real people and real life experiences that the kids have been able to connect to and to get excited about. With my own personal reflection prior to this pilot, I felt consistently stressed, trying to piece things together to create a lesson that I felt was best suited for the topic that I needed to teach, with what seemed like no real end goal. But with Wit and Wisdom, there's a plan, and the kids are able to track their learning and they're able to watch their growth as they're working towards being able to complete this end of module task all on their own. And through that path, the biggest growth that I've seen is in their writing. They're able to build on their skills and be able to write a 4 to 5 paragraph essay all on their own. And when I had introduced what an essay is and what that entails and what goes into writing 4 to 5 paragraphs, I've never had a group of students before this year say, yeah, I can't wait to write an essay. Which was huge and really exciting. I've literally been brought to tears this year because of the type of academic language that my kids have used and the connections that they have been able to make within our group discussions. And we have those types of discussions every single day through the lessons of Wit and Wisdom. And the kids are able to get excited about that. And when they see their teacher get so excited, then that's a big deal for them. And they keep going and they're motivated and they're so interested that Wit and Wisdom has become like our best part of our day from day one till now. And we're still going strong and they don't want to end it, which is huge. So I know for me, I would be quite sad not to move forward with Wit and Wisdom just because of what I have seen this year. And it would be not to be able to give this kind of education to my future students. So thank you, Phil.
I have a question. Thank you for that. And your colleague who spoke previously, it's clear that this is making an impression on the faculty and the students. A concern that I've had from the outset is whether either program, and it strikes me that either program is going to do a fine job. So I don't know that I personally have a preference between one or the other. My concern is, do you as a faculty member feel that sort of canned curricula like this take away from your freedom to structure your class in accordance with your best judgment and in accordance with what your students need in your classroom? Why or why not?
I think for me personally, like having what we have currently now, I do like the flexibility, but with Wit and Wisdom, it has not, and I have not felt that it is a structured lesson. Like I do have a teacher manual that I can look at, but it is not a scripted lesson that I am going through and holding the book and just going through the pieces. I have felt that within the lesson, there's that plan and there's that goal, but I still have that flexibility that I have had in order to create a lesson that is best suited for my kids. And I think that I like that. I like that Wit and Wisdom is like that it has that structure, but I do still have so much flexibility to make sure it's best for what my specific kids need.
Okay, now I'm going to really put you on the spot. Do you feel as though what you just said, and that's a very helpful perspective, would you say that you are an outlier among your colleagues in saying that, or that what you just said probably reflects what many of your colleagues would think?
based on wit and wisdom.
Or either one?
I mean, from my colleagues, we like flexibility, but we have not liked that what we currently have now. It seems like there's no real end. Like like I said earlier, we're piecing things together, and it is quite honestly very stressful for us. I have felt so much better having this pilot and having that goal, but I know that within my colleagues that we need something. We need something else, that what we currently have is just not having it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think just to build on that, any Savas pilot teachers be able to address that for Mr. Keener?
Thank you, Mr. Bomowski. That would be very helpful. So someone who piloted Savas, who wants to sort of answer the same question.
Yes, the students leaving. Oh,
There's a whole bunch of people coming up. or leaving.
no, it looks like we have some students leaving.
Yes, please. Okay, so I am a literacy coach here at Hempfield. I work at Mountville Elementary. So I've gotten the opportunity to actually see both programs. I've gotten trained through Wit and Wisdom. I've also gotten trained through my view and my perspectives in 6th grade. And I think you're asking about the structured piece of it, or is it like a canned program? Is that what you're saying?
Sort of a little of both. I mean,
Okay.
in other words, I think we can all agree that it probably shouldn't be a free-for-all district-wide. Okay,
Yes.
we're funneling students from, I think, 7 elementary schools into 1 middle school and then 2 middle schools and 1 high school. There needs to be some foundation, but yet we have an extraordinarily talented faculty across the district, all of whom perceive things and want to teach things differently. So I guess my question is, how do we harmonize that, and where do you fall sort of in that continuum?
Yeah, so I think that's a really great question that you ask, and I've had the opportunity to really watch both. One thing with my view is it is a lot more scripted. Ashley can also speak to that. Like, you have your lesson and it kind of gives you, like, is it blue? There's like the teacher words and then
words, yeah.
that you're
A guide.
supposed to say to your students. Wit and Wisdom isn't like that. It's more, these are the topics. This is the sort of stuff that you're going to be teaching. And it's not, there's no scripts. There's a lot of times there's not even the organizer for your students, like they're creating it. So I do feel like there is still that craft part that teachers can hone in on doing Wit and Wisdom. Also, yeah, like, go ahead, you can talk more about Savas.
So yeah, my view, even though it is very scripted, I have so many different resources that I can pull from throughout the day. So like the main lesson, I had a lot of scripted things that I would do every day, but then more during the intervention time or small group time, I had so many different resources that I had the choice to then pull from that then supported what I was teaching in that whole group. So even though it was more like, this is what you teach whole group, when I had my individual small group, I was able to make that choice of my own of what I was using and how I was going to use it.
And I feel like before, when I came into this district, so this is my 2nd year here, I felt like, I came in last year as a brand new coach. And so I said, okay, I sat down with so many teams of teachers saying, like, what can I do to help you? Commonly, they all said resources, like we have the, PD standards, we have the YAG, the year in the glance, but like, we need resources that we can commonly use amongst teachers. And I would go into classrooms and I would see a 3rd grade teacher using the same resource or the same novel as then I would go see a 4th grade teacher use, or even a 5th grade teacher at that. And so just the fact that a program can have, specific resources for that grade level only to use, I think is so huge for our students and our teachers as well, to keep that consistency.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Ashley, was there anything else you want to share about Savas?
I thought it was great. I loved having the resources that I wasn't constantly going out and looking for. There was a lot of assessments that I was able to use to then hone in on different skills that my students needed. So I just really appreciate any program that would make across the district more unified. I'm able to then do more research and able to support my students better, because then I'm not always looking for resources to support the main lesson. I just think us teachers deserve that, and our students deserve more of that time that we can give them with a program. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kim Reinier, and I'm a literacy coach at Farmdale Elementary School. I'm going to share with you a piece of writing from a fifth grade classroom that was from Module 2. And this is an explanatory passage. And I'm sharing it because, as we've said a lot of times tonight, it's hard to capture the data in numbers, but we keep saying how much we're impressed with the students' writing. So I'd like you to kind of experience a little bit of what that sounds like. This student is really an average performing student in a classroom, very hardworking student. And they're a student that receives outside supports like supports like Title I reading support. And this is what from Module 2, what their explanatory passage was. They were writing kind of in the theme of the TDA, where they had to explain what the theme of the text was, which was the Phantom Toll Booth, their core text, and then support their theme with evidence from the text and then explanation, exactly what they're asked to do in a TDA. So the Phantom Toll Booth is more than just a story about a boy named Milo, who goes on a magical adventure in the lands beyond. It's a story that teaches about knowledge and perseverance, especially when you put your mindset to work. In this story, Milo undergoes a transformation that supports the theme of perseverance and knowledge by meeting many people along the way, especially when Rhyme tells Milo that he can do anything if you believe in yourself. In the text, it says, in the beginning of the story, and this is a quotation, there was once a boy named Milo who didn't know what to do with himself, not just sometimes, but always. And that's a quote from Juster on page 9. This proves Milo doesn't have interest in anything and was bored with everything he did. In the text, it says at the end of the book, and another quote, and in the very room in which he sat, there were books that can take you anywhere, and things to invent and make and build and break, and all the puzzles and excitement of everything he didn't know, music to play, songs to sing, and words to imagine and play. Someday and make real. This shows Milo has changed, because before he didn't want to do anything or pay attention to do anything. And now he loves to pay attention to everything. Milo now knows he needs to keep gaining knowledge and he needs to keep learning. So thank you for letting me share that. The classroom that this came from is an extraordinary fifth grade teacher. And she wanted to pilot because she was worried about exactly what you said, Mr. Keener, losing herself in a program and the craft and her originality. And she actually felt that the program enhanced that instead of inhibited it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kim Rauscher, Principal of East Petersburg. And this evening, I'd like to echo so much of what the teachers have said this evening, as well as Dr. Dandridge and Jason Hoffman. Wit and Wisdom has been amazing to watch our teachers implement. I've had the privilege of watching it in grades 1, 2, and 1 6th grade teacher. There's some things that are definitely amazing to see. And I have one point that has not been made yet that I think is important. We have students who come to our country that are not, English speakers. And for them to be able to have access, and we talk about that when we talk about English language learners, we talk about that when we talk about our special ed students, where our children can come into a classroom hear rich text and be able to ascertain information, build background knowledge, maybe not through the text itself because they're unable at the time to read it, but instead through the interpretation of artwork. For example, as I walked into classrooms to listen to our students talk about the gradients of vocabulary words, as I listened to our teachers be true facilitators of learning rather than doing all the giving, they're critical listeners. They're trying to shift the conversation. They're trying to take the analysis that the children are trying to do and take it to another level. What a cool problem when our writers are writing and the conversation is not, I don't know what to write, but instead, how can I make it more concise? Because I've done all this analysis and cross curriculum integration, and now I have too much to share. How do I pare that down? That is what's going on in our classrooms, and it's beautiful to see. Wouldn't it be nice to watch our teachers spend their time not looking for materials that may not be common from classroom to classroom, but rather have those rich, deep conversations about what the program is offering and how we can best facilitate that with the learning of our students, putting our students at the front of that process. So accessibility, cross-curricular integration, increased writing, richness of dialogue. It has been phenomenal to watch. I am so proud of our teachers who've taken the risk to move forward with the pilots. And I see great things to come, no matter what your decision is. I think this will take Hemphill to a whole nother level. So thanks for your time this evening.
And I'll wrap it up. Stacy Kane, principal at Mountville, just as the last person, because I've had the privilege of seeing both programs in my building, both the Savas, my view and my perspectives, as well as Wit and Wisdom. 2 first graders, as well as my entire second grade, my entire third, and my entire sixth have used my view, and my 6th grade, my perspectives. 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Fitzgerald, who is here, and my 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Jensen, who is here, both used Wit and Wisdom. I will say that no matter which pilot classroom you walked into, you saw students who had text in their hands. The consistency was evident. It was rich, whether it was from the novel or the trade book, or whether it was from the workbook and the experts. Students were discussing the text. They were using reading strategies. The teachers were guiding them through those pieces. When students were writing, I think that that was a large difference that I noticed. When students were writing in the Savas programs, it was more in the workbook. They were answering questions and doing a little text dependent type prompt, but it didn't go as in depth. I will say that my perspective in 6th grade did mirror more like Wit and Wisdom. So not necessarily the Socratic seminars and the rich discussions in the same way that Wit and Wisdom was happening. However, it was very similar in the 6th grade versus what you would see in the primary Savas classrooms. I could walk into any 2nd grade classroom and I would walk in and I definitely would see the teacher teaching and the students doing one lesson, and I wouldn't skip a beat if I walked into the next 2nd grade or the 3rd 2nd grade, because they were following it with fidelity. It's scripted. It tells them what they need to do. When I walked into the Wit and Wisdom classrooms, there was a level of engagement that was unlike any other classroom in my building. The students were actively engaged in discussion of text, whether they were in small groups, whole group discussion. They were eager to come and to talk about what are we doing today and how are we going to take this deeper and go farther. Their writing was evident. They were so excited to share what they were producing. When you come into the room, they wanted to post it on the wall. They wanted to bring it up and share it with you. They were very proud of their work, and their work was evident of what had been done in the classrooms, as Stephanie was reading to you, and what some of the examples that you heard from the other teachers. I will say that regardless of what program would be chosen, the teachers do need something consistent to guide their instruction. We need consistent resources. We need, for the students, we need consistent resources for the teachers. It cannot be one teacher is pulling from this pot, or teachers pay teachers, and another teacher is pulling from this resource. We need to have consistency, and by buying into a program that is research-based, that is aligned to what students need to be able to do as they are getting older and going out into their careers and into whether it's college or whether it is the workforce, we need to prepare our students. And if we continue to not have a program, we're going to continue to flounder in being able to prepare them. Thank you. Questions?
I also want to share with the board, it was shared with me, 2 Savas pilot teachers. I'm not sure if there's any others from Savas in the audience, but there were 2 who shared information with you via email today. So all the board members, you did receive that. If you did not get to see it, again, it is in your email. Mrs. Appleby and Mrs. Bush, 2 first grade teachers at Mountville. They went through many of the positives that they have seen from the pilot from Savas, my view. They noted things in there around the vocabulary, the assessments, the guided reading materials, the interventions, the abundance of resources, the online materials, the writing components. So they went on. I'm not going to go and read it. You do have it. But I also want to say, I want to thank the Savas team. We met with both Savas and Great Minds. And we had asked, because of knowing what the recommendation was, we wanted to see a school district that is beyond year 1 of the implementation of my view, my perspectives. And so we asked the Savas team to bring us to that district. And so yesterday, Dr. Dandridge, Mr. Hoffman, myself, Mr. Donato, and went to a different district out of this area. We spent the day there in classrooms getting to see what the program looked like beyond year 1 of the implementation. And we definitely, again, saw things that our teachers were doing from an implementation standpoint, but we were able to see classrooms in which what was described in terms of the engagement on the Wit and Wisdom side that I would say mirrored that with some of the experienced teachers beyond a year 1. Mr. Keener, I think your point, we've discussed that many times in terms of the artistry and the craft that the teacher brings to the table, to their classroom. And teachers do have that ability regardless of the programs. I think overwhelmingly, I do want to extend my thanks and appreciation to all of our pilot teachers. You've put in a tremendous amount of time, energy, and effort this year for something that you wanted to do. And that is such an appreciation that we have, because what you were doing was going then to directly positively impact our students. No matter what, I wholeheartedly agree. We need a program for our teachers moving forward. And I want to thank both of the companies for being here tonight and for your professionalism in working with us over the last year, and all that you've done to bring us the support, the resources, answer our questions, and quite frankly, being here tonight. I think that speaks volumes for both of your companies and the commitment that you show to your work product. So thank you for that.
All right, now we wanted to give the opportunity for representatives from both Great Minds and from Savas to share any thoughts that they have and to be able to engage with the board for questions that you might have for them, as I know it was your request to have them here. Sure.
Thanks. Actually, let me take my Great Minds hat off. Forget I'm from Great Minds right now, because your question is dead on. And it's really the question that everybody should be asking when we're looking at where we're headed with education. So just a little bit about this. As a teacher, am I going to have freedom and flexibility, but be provided with high quality instructional materials to guide that? Help me to understand where my students are and make instructional decisions. I went into the classroom in 2007, okay, little later in life. It was my midlife crisis. Literally was handed a pacing guide and the state standards. And I said, it was a math, that was a math teacher. Had an undergraduate degree in engineering, 6th grade math. This is gonna be easy, right? It was not easy. One of the hardest things I've done in my life. There were textbooks in a hall closet someplace. Everything else was teachers pay teachers, finding other teachers. All of that with what's going on, not just Great Minds, Savas, everybody in the world of educational resources now has changed. And that is that companies, because you've demanded it, are producing high quality instructional materials. And when you hand those to teachers and then you prepare them, invest in them with the training and give them the time to implement with fidelity, like Mr. Hoffman's done. This has been literally the best pilot process I've ever seen. The depth of research that you all have done and care and listening to us, quite frankly, helping you guide you through that. You can't go wrong. And so now I'll put my Great Minds hat back on and say that whether you select Great Minds or to my view, my perspective, you can't go wrong because both of us, and there's other companies out there that have done the same, are responding to this call for preparing teachers and giving them high quality instructional materials, not a script. And that's very important. And I think you heard that, but it's structure that frankly, and as a former teacher, we didn't have before. And that's the beauty of what's going on right now, I believe.
Thank you.
I'll start. Thank you again for having us, and we appreciate the time and effort that the board, the administrators, teachers, the pilot teachers, students have gone through. We know that piloting ELA is really, really difficult and challenging. So we admire the work that's done in the classrooms here at Hempfield and the administrators, as Mr. Hoffman and Dr. Bainbridge and the rest of this team here. We know ELA literacy is hard, and especially when kids are coming off of COVID and other things that are impacting their lives. To what Carl said, whatever program you select, we do agree that a program would be beneficial for your teachers and your students, with flexibility for them to use their creativity and use their craft as well. We came prepared to talk about some of the science of reading in our program. We have some data. I don't know whether that makes sense for us to even go through it at this point. We can leave it with you as a leave behind. But I will say this, that it's really hard to look at any impact on data within a year, 2 years, even 3 years. When you're really looking at an impact of a program, I think you really need to look over 18, 24, 36 months, especially for literacy, because that's, I think, what it takes. And again, like I said, we'll leave behind, if you want, some of the slides that we put together with 7 districts in Pennsylvania, looking at PSSA data from 2021 to 2022, the state averages, as well as how they performed against the state. But I think you'll find that the most important thing, I think, is implementation with fidelity of professional development curriculum, making sure there's change of practice in the schools and making sure there's ongoing support for the teachers. And again, I think if you look at it, a lot of these school districts, even that implemented within a year to 2 years, are showing a continuum of progression in the right direction. So I actually see you have the handouts on there. I'm happy to go through 1 or 2, just if you're interested. If you turn to the Kiski on page, I think Kiski's on page 3. Just to give you some highlights, and we took the time with our research team to pull this together in preparation for this meeting. If you look at Kiski, there's actually 2 slides. The first slide shows the PSSA against the state and the school district. So if you take a look at grade 1 and grade 2 and grade 3, you'll see that the Kiski, which is a Western Pennsylvania district, outperformed the state. But if you actually take a look at the second page there, you'll notice that that actually shows the PSSA scores for the most recently against the state average as well. So grade 3, while it shows it went down a percentage point, it's above the state average. This is also a new cohort that's coming in, as you can see, because they're coming from 2nd to 3rd grade. But if you look at 4th and 5th grade, they are up 14 percentage points from the previous year and 25% above the state. And then 5th grade, 12 percentage points from previous and above the state by 13%. So, we try to do the best we can to show how some performance within a year and a half. And again, like I said, they are showing a progression in the right direction, but it does still take time. I'll pinpoint one other one if you want to turn to page 11, if you don't mind. Just taking another district in a different location. If you look at Stroudsburg School District, I think what you'll see at Stroudsburg too, that all grades are below the state average on the first slide. But if you take a look at the second slide, you'll notice that they are showing, again, showing some gains while third and fourth grade shows small there's some small decrease in third grade and below the state percentage points. You'll notice that actually fourth grade and fifth grade did, while they're below the state, they did actually show growth in those years. So again, these are districts in this presentation packet that actually implemented within 2 years. Some of them, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And so just to make sure that that I'm looking at this properly, these are all districts that have used Savas for all three of those grades.
Correct, for the
Okay,
last
so
2
we're
years.
seeing a longitudinal progression
For the last 2 years.
across 3 years of
2 years, 2 years.
I'm sorry,
2
2
years,
years of
yes.
Savas and stuff.
That's right,
Okay.
that's right.
Thank you.
It's K through 5, but it obviously for PSSA testing is 3, 4, and 5. So we try to give a representation of 7 Pennsylvania districts. So yes, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kristen, this is Kristen, their lead literacy, I forget your whole title.
She's our lead literacy specialist.
Sorry, thank you. So we had the opportunity to meet with her as well, and I think it might be helpful for the board just to hear a little bit more from your perspectives about when you have so many materials within the program, so many resources available for teachers. How do you work with teachers from the training standpoint so that they still own that craft and that artistry of teaching while still implementing with fidelity to the program?
Sure.
Savas and then Wit and Wisdom.
I can actually speak to that a little bit from, I guess I'll take my Savas hat off for a second and talk to you a little bit about my experience in the classroom. I had 25 years in public education. I taught kindergarten and I taught 5th grade, but the majority of my time was an elementary school principal and then a curriculum director. So I sat on the other side of this microphone many, many times doing exactly what you're trying to do. Adopt a new literacy program for consistency across your school district. I had that same conversation with my superintendent, must have been 12 years ago now, when I was still there, when he said to me, we need a literacy program. Our teachers are all they're working really hard. They're on Teachers Pay Teachers, but I see something different happening everywhere. And we have 5 different schools, 5 different towns feeding into one middle school. I said, okay, but how about if I can just bring them together and do a little more work with them? And he said, you know what, Kristen, the kids in our school district don't deserve not to have to wait 4 more years for that to happen. So we bought a program and we did just what you did. We piloted for an entire year. We chose our program. We went with Pearson, now Savas. And teachers said the same thing about the blueprint in the teacher's manual. They said, it's so scripted. It's not scripted, really. What it is an idea of what to say, because you have a lot of different teachers in your schools. You have first-year teachers who don't have any idea of what to say. You have veteran teachers that can pick up a teacher's manual, read the blue font and say, yeah, I got that. And then they make that lesson their own. So that's where the flexibility comes in. It feels in the very first year of implementation like it's, oh, I have to say this. You don't have to do that, but teachers are learning a new program. Just like students learn something new every year, teachers are learning something new. One of the things teachers dislike about getting a new program is holding a teacher's manual, because it makes it feel uncomfortable for them that very first year. But then it's not. And that's when the flexibility comes in. That's where their craft comes in. I always say to teachers when I'm doing training with them, I pick up the teacher's manual and I say, guess what? This is the science of teaching reading, but you bring the art of teaching reading into your classroom. And that's where the flexibility comes from. I go into my view classrooms the second year of implementation, and what it looked like during the pilot is 180 degrees from what it looks like when they're doing their implementation, because they say, oh yeah, I remember that story. I remember I said this and the kids got really excited about that. I remember what I did with it. And that's where the flexibility comes from. I think that during this pilot, and I didn't work this pilot, full disclosure, I did the initial presentation way back about a year ago. But my understanding is that some teachers in the pilot didn't get to experience every single part of my view, like the week 6 project, which is a huge part of my view, where students are actually taking informed action on something that is important to them. Book club. I know that no one was able to do book club in the pilot. Book club does a couple different things, puts real books in the hands of students. Not that the text inside the student interactive, that's authentic text. You can buy it at Barnes and Noble or Amazon. What it's done, what has happened is it's been put into the student interactive so that students can mark that text up. Because we know from brain research that marking that text up really allows students to cross those synapses in their brains. But with book club, they have real books in their hands. And they, well, if any of you are in a book club, you know what you do in a book club. You read the book, you talk about the book, and you really develop a love for literacy. The book club lesson plan also has a TDA prompt associated with it. So teachers didn't get to experience that during this pilot. That's more of the flexibility, more of the way they can bring that art of teaching into their classroom.
Thank you.
So if I understood the question correctly, we have a pretty formal structured professional development plan where learning is chunked. So there's obviously different components to ELA instruction. There's writing, there's learning to speak and listen, there's grammar conventions, all integrated based on these texts, but we don't throw everything at a teacher in like one professional development session or two, or meet with them in their PLCs. We're going to chunk it and go over these things over time in designed training events. The other thing that's going on is your district would be assigned an implementation leader to work with leadership, starting with the curriculum director, superintendent, and then down in the schools with principals, assistant principals, reading specialists, or any other specialists. We would also ask or recommend that all of the leadership go through a prescribed set of training events as well. And what classroom observations look like, how to best support the changes in instruction and what's going on in these classrooms as teachers develop and get a better understanding of what the program's designed to do, as well as hone their craft. That normally is kind of on an accelerated basis. A 2-year program looks better when it's 3 years spread out, so that you're not overwhelming teachers. You're allowing them to teach through modules, get to see what an arc of lesson summative assessment looks like, an end of module assessment. They start to piece things together. Don't overwhelm them. Constant feedback, and then once you've gotten through that point, we also do offer site-based, very customized coaching. So if there are certain issues that the district starts to see, or things that they want to improve on, or there's some strategic planning going on about things that they'd like to see, then we have coaches that would sit down, act like consultants, and put together a plan for, more strategic coaching.
Other board members?
I've got a couple. So for purposes of clarity, I know you just touched on this, and so I'm going to take this, I want to hear more. And this is for both groups. Take me through the training processes to get teachers up and running. Specifically, what is it that you do? How do you get people up and running? How do you get people on board? How do you make sure that our teachers are doing this and carrying this out the way that it's designed? Specifically.
So we're going to start with a program for every teacher called Launch. And Launch is going to be, here's what this program's intended to do. It's going to be an inventory of the materials that you have. What are the components of a lesson? Kind of walk them through the basics. Then the intention is to allow them to teach a couple of weeks of lessons. And then we come back and we do what we call prep and customization, Okay, so now you've taught it for a couple of weeks. What questions do you have? Now let's take a deeper look at what we want you to be doing as you're prepping for a lesson based on what you're seeing with your learners. Okay, getting that feedback from formative assessment, because there's some kind of formative assessment every day. There's an opportunity to assess, are my students getting it or not? Where could they use help? And then how to start to plan lessons with more purpose based on what you're seeing in the classroom, and then customize around it. So this is where that freedom and flexibility comes in, where it looks like a script, but we start to help teachers to see, based on what's going on in their classroom, what assessment is telling them, how to do some customization around the lesson. And then when you get beyond that, now we start doing very specific blocks about writing, or very specific blocks about grammar and conventions, and how to enhance lessons, how to understand assessment around those things. All told, in the first year, we would recommend probably like four different professional development sessions with teachers, as well as with leadership. And that would be at least 2 with leadership. That would be like an assistant principal who might be working directly with ELA in the classrooms, or the principal, and definitely with like reading specialists.
That's year 1.
Yes.
What happens year 2, 3, 4? I become a teacher in 4 years. God help us all. What do you do for me?
Yeah. So
what's the ongoing plan? 3 years. Yeah.
So 3 years.
Yeah. So there are enough of those chunked learning experiences that in an ideal world, 2 or 3 years, we could take you over that. So to answer one of your questions, a new teacher shows up and we're 2 years into this or 3 years into the implementation. This is where our implementation lead, working with Mr. Hoffman, we take inventory of that in June, July now, and say, what are we looking at next year? Well, we're gonna have 2 new kindergarten teachers. We have 2 third grade teachers retiring. We don't know exactly who's gonna be where yet. As soon as we can get them into a classroom, we want to do that launch with them, get them familiar, and maybe even do the prep and customization part of it, because we know now there's enough institutional knowledge in the buildings of teachers that have taught it for 2 or 3 years that they're probably going to be mentored some, and they're probably going to be given guidance from their leadership, the reading specialists and the assistant principals, or whoever assumes that role. So there's a little bit more support now, right? It's not everybody doing it new at once. But a lot of it comes down to, this consulting model where the implementation lead, my role, so I'm the director of sales and implementation support. So I spend time in both worlds, so events like this or first time presentations, but then I also spend a lot of time with our implementation managers going into and doing business reviews, essentially going into school, say, where are we at? Where do we want to be? This gentleman here will have a big say in that. So will the board, as you guys are seeing what's going on in classrooms and hearing things. You got to give us that feedback so we can work with you to piece this together, as we move forward. So there's no one implementation that looks exactly the same. Because there's no one district that's the same. Teachers, students, etc.
Okay. What about you?
So I'm going to pass it to Melissa Blasek, who's a former teacher and literacy specialist. But I will say one thing: we have an entire service organization. Kristen's part of the service organization, and we have an entire continuum of professional development, from program activation we call into job embedded services. We do come in and create a customized, personalized professional learning plan with the district, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, whatever it may be. But I'm going to let Missy talk a little bit about that, because she's also had experience at training districts on rolling out our ELA programs as well.
Hi, thanks, Andy. So in putting the quote together, we worked with Jason in customizing professional development. And in this, if you would go with us, we would roll out a plan starting in the summer in June, where we would have 2 days of professional development for the teachers. And that would include a modeled lesson for reading and writing. It would include training on the program. It would end all of the resources, the online component, And then that would continue into the year where there's specific PD days. On those PD days, we talked about having specific like 90-minute workshops that the teachers would sign up for. They would be based on specific topics of interest within ELA. We also discussed administrative training. So that would be data training for the administrators, a listen and look for tool. So that gives the administrators a tool where they understand the program. They know how to go in and observe the teacher and coach the teachers. So those are just some of the topics we started talking about. We also understand that the district's looking at hiring some coaches to work with the teachers throughout the year in classrooms. So we would provide coaching and modeling for those teachers. That would be on an ongoing basis. And then if there were year 2 and 3 professional development, we would work on customizing that training for year 2 and 3, depending where you are. If there's new teachers, we have a 24/7 online site where teachers can do asynchronous training to get caught up to speed if that's something that's of need. Okay.
Question to both them. So the plans you presented, what's the cost? So like your plan that you just presented to us, what's that cost? Because I noticed in both the budgets, that's an additional cost not quoted. So what's your two costs of the plans you just presented?
So ours was actually in the quote for professional development. That was in the numbers that Dr. Danbridge showed there. So again, we create the continuum as Melissa talked about, in initial program activation, some implementation essentials, we call it, and job embedded services would be the coaching and modeling. The 24/7 access we call My Savage training has asynchronous modules. It's in addition to, not to supplement the in-person training that we do. But all of that was included in the updated pricing that we provided to the school district.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, both of those final numbers include all of the training costs.
Those additional costs.
So I
think for us, it's important to know we have two different services components in our services. We have education consultants that are actually subject matter experts in literacy that will come in and do the job embedded services. And Kristen oversees a team that does a lot of the initial program activation and stays along with the district in order to make sure that the implementation is done with fidelity. We also do assign what we call a customer success manager to the district. More of their responsibility is the single point of contact, more like an executive project manager, but also handle the logistics, the digital licensing, the technology implementation, integration, and things like that. So that's all part of the service that we provide as part of the implementation.
Thank you.
So one of the questions I had, want to address to Savas and Wit and Wisdom. One of the options we talked about was doing another pilot year because we didn't see statistical significance in the first year. I heard somebody say it takes 18 to 36 months. My question is for both you guys, is it realistic to see statistical improvement if we do another year? What's your 2 cents, both of you guys?
To do another year of piloting.
Yeah.
I think now that you've got every teacher in the district using the program, I'll go on a limb, I think you're gonna see growth. Coherence, I just think the programs are better than what's currently going on. The way some of these teachers described it, kind of scrambling for their own resources. So handing them high quality instructional materials, even when they're learning to go through it in that first year, is going to show an improvement. But I can't promise you like statistically significant. I think you'll definitely see more efficient, more effective classrooms with.
Savas, you have any comments?
So I will say that it depends how you're defining statistical. I would also say that if you switch the pilot teachers, you're now starting over for another year. So if we actually kept the same pilot teachers, I would say that you probably will see some impact in a positive way with those teachers that are continuing the pilot for the second year. Yeah, well, true, different kids, yeah.
And I have a question for Dr. Dandridge. one of your slides, you said survey data for parents, students, teachers slightly in favor. Administration strongly in favor. Just there's kind of a difference there. Maybe explain that. Were the administrators not surveyed, or could you explain that a little more?
Sure, that goes back to, I believe it was the March presentation, data presentation. So we surveyed all of our teachers and asked them to come to consensus over which program that they chose. By and large, they preferred the program that they were in, but there was a slight nod towards Wit and Wisdom in that data slide. In the surveys that we gave to the parents and to the students, again, a lot of positive feedback, slight nods toward Wit and Wisdom. With the administrators, we asked each of them to choose which program, whether they preferred Wit and Wisdom in the classrooms, Savas in the classroom, or the current curriculum. And they 8 out of 9 chose Wit and Wisdom. One of them said either would be great.
So the reality is that the students' parents like both of them.
Yes,
but they like one a little better. That kind of is 2 cents.
Yeah, the sample sizes weren't equal. So again, I hate making those strong statements, but yeah, I think we saw positive feedback on both the programs that were being used in the classroom.
Thank you.
I have a question for Dr. Danbridge or Mr. Hoffman. Based on this, we have approximately in all our buildings, they're pretty much in the PSSAs, even with the slight decrease this year. There's 60% or above they're scoring proficient and advanced. How is Wit and Wisdom going to help? We heard a lot from the teachers about the writing component and they're becoming better writings. Granted, that's great, but how's it going to totally help the kids that are not proficient and advanced? I guess, why did you pick this program for those students?
So I'll start and then Mr. Hoffman, feel free to add. I will say we have identified writing as a need from the beginning, right? Writing is 25% of that ELA PSSA score. One of the things that we have heard from our teachers, we've seen in the classroom is stronger writing from our students. My expectation is that we're going to see stronger ELA scores translate through using that program, simply because of the improved writing, right? I believe there's also the advantage of using those consistent materials across the board in all of our grade levels, no matter where they're moving, that give them the foundation really to build off of with our students. I think that will also translate into stronger PSSA scores. If you remember from the recommendation that we gave 2 weeks ago, we do have goals in there for the district that we will monitor on the writing that they will see in the classroom, as well as the reading that they are doing and how they're performing on the internal benchmarks.
Yeah, I think the other component too is that the balanced literacy approach that we have been using has been shown not to work for kids in increasing comprehension scores. I was focused on you're teaching individual skills like inferencing or main idea. And if you teach those skills, that's one thing, but if the kids can't read the text, that doesn't help. So what the science of reading says and what both of these programs support is the phonics component, making sure that kids can actually read the words on the page. And then the second piece is the knowledge building, so that they have the background knowledge that leads into that. I had shared Scarborough's rope with you before that shows all of those components of reading twisted together. And background knowledge is a huge component of that. I think I might have referenced several years ago the baseball study where they where they assessed 4 groups of kids. A group of kids who knew a lot about baseball and were great readers, a group of kids who knew a lot about baseball and were not good readers, a group of kids who were great readers but knew nothing about baseball, and kids who knew nothing about baseball and were poor readers. Oh, the kids who knew a lot about baseball and were great readers scored the exact same way as the kids who knew a lot about baseball and were poor readers. And the kids who didn't know a lot about baseball and were great readers scored below them. So it wasn't the reading skill, it was the background knowledge they were bringing to that. So the whole idea that you've heard the teachers talking about of teachers through these texts building background knowledge for kids allows that playing field to be leveled. And it allows everybody to come in with that increased background knowledge. The more background we can build, the better off our kids are, because they will have those schemas in their brain to hang these new things that they're learning and reading from. So I think in addition to what Dr. Dandridge shared, that's the other piece we have to keep in mind, is that our reading instruction has been based on a theory that has been proven to not be successful. These two programs are based on a theory that has been shown to be successful.
Oh, is it on now?
Yeah.
Sorry. I think that if I could just follow up on that, I think that that baseball study is really well known. You know, for everyone who's in education, and building that content knowledge that turns into background knowledge is critically important and a huge part of my view. In your other brochure or pamphlet there, packet that we gave you, if you turn to page 4, you can actually see how knowledge building is included in my view literacy, but included in a way that's different from other programs. Every program will have units of study or modules that have a science or a social studies theme. In my view, our themes are recursive at every single grade level, which means that students are acquiring that content knowledge that turns into background knowledge for their students the next year. If anybody in the room is a classroom teacher, you know that sometimes we spend an awful lot of time building background knowledge before we read something with our students. That takes away really important instructional time. With my view, that doesn't happen because they have the background knowledge from the year before. And that graphic there shows those themes and how they're recursive. The next page shows where content knowledge is built throughout the unit. One of the things that I love the most about my view is the fact that there are 5 units of study. They're each 6 weeks long. So if you do the math on that, that's 150 days of instruction. My view is a program that's doable within a school year because most schools have 180-ish days of instruction. So what does that mean? It means that the instruction can all be accomplished. It means there's time for assessment. You don't have to find extra time for that. There's time for field trips. There's time for snow days if we ever get to have another snow day. There's time for special celebrations. There's time for special author studies, to study Eric Carle in grade 1 or to read a favorite novel in grade 5. So that unit structure is represented there, and that content knowledge is built throughout that unit, throughout the week, every single day in the mini lessons, and then again through content readers and the book club that we talked about a little bit earlier.
So go ahead, Justin.
No, go ahead.
I'll be quick. I'm going to be very brief, and I'll ask for your answer to be brief as well, if you don't mind, because we'll be here till 2 a.m, maybe literally. What are your current areas of opportunity for each of the organizations that your organization has identified? What are you working on currently to improve your programs? If you ask that about me to me about my company, my current organization, I can give you a laundry list of things that we're currently working on that are in R&D right now, because we're trying to do our best to stay ahead of the market and trying to continue to advance what we do. What are you doing?
Well, we're always writing. We're always producing more high quality instructional material. So in GSS Aligned Science program, we have it available now K-5 as example. We're extending that K-8. We're always improving the existing programs we have. Really we spend a lot of time with educators, people that are implementing our programs, to figure out what's working, what can be improved, and then making those changes, those revisions.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to let Kristen talk about it, but typically we are always looking for feedback from our users and our pilot teachers and the people we work with. That enhances a lot of our programs and our services organization too, which is really important. But Kristen, I think you talk a little bit more about what we're doing specifically around literacy.
There's actually some feedback that we got from this year's pilot teachers right here in Hempfield and other pilot teachers in the last 18 months that we're acting on right now. First and foremost, pilot teachers who are sitting behind me, you'll be happy to know that the student interactive is going to be reorganized for students. So there's less flipping. That was something that teachers said to us loud and clear. It's what we're acting on right now. Our writing instruction is going to be enhanced. Teachers talked about liking the use of being able to use their own mentor texts for writing instruction, but they also talked about, wouldn't it be great if we had exemplars or short little pieces of mentor text? So those are going to be created as well. Foundational skills are being enhanced. You're using foundation, so that would be a little bit different. And the teacher's manual is going to have a new facelift on it, so that there's more white space in and around that blue font to make it easier for teachers to navigate. And those are all things that teachers asked for, and we're going to follow through on.
Very good. Thank you. Sorry.
My question is brief, and good evening. My question is tied to the coaches that the district would, quote, be expected or required or suggested to hire. What has been your experience with districts having to invest beyond the cost that's in this proposal from each of you?
So can I ask a question of you, of the coaches? Because I know the presentation showed this is, I mean, so when you put coaches in place with the implementation of a new program, it's, and they're tasked to really become experts in that program, does a couple of things. One, it lessens the burden or the cost of buying professional development from us. So we're gonna, if this works the way I think it is, and I'm from speaking out of school, tell me, we're gonna do a train the trainer. So that those coaches are deployed in your side of your district, but they have access to our folks that are helping them and coming on site and helping them to become, you know, what we would otherwise send a coach in and charge you a lot more for.
Right, and so the idea is that those coaches would be.
I'm sorry, may I just jump in and piggyback on Mr. Walkerman's question? I want to make sure I understand that response. You're saying that if the district hires coaches to assist in the implementation of your program, that decreases the amount of time that you need to spend to. Did I hear you correctly? Did I hear you correctly?
Over the life of the implementation, you would expect that we would expect that, yes, what otherwise the investment could be. And I'm not changing the numbers you have now.
I'll get there in a moment.
Yeah, that includes all the professional development. But if we would want to invest in those coaches so that you have on-site facilitators.
Okay, so then, since there would be less time spent by your staff, how would, if at all, how would the proposal, the financial terms of the proposal be adjusted to compensate the district for shifting some of those responsibilities from your staff to ours?
Yep. So the proposal that was put together by the company, by both companies, relies on us having those two coaches. So the coaching hours that we have from both companies is assuming that we have two coaches internally working with our teachers to implement this program with fidelity. So it will not change the costs that are up there. If those coaches are not part of what occurs, then we could incur additional expenses from coaching from either company to bring in their people to provide that coaching.
So to be clear with my question, and I want to give you a chance to respond. My question was, is each of your programs, is that correct, what Mr. Hoffman said, that each of your programs with your proposals is requiring us to invest potentially an additional $200,000 for at least a year in additional support staff on site that are our employees? I want to.
So ours is not, but we built in the ability to do to coach your trainers as a train the trainer model. Our goal is always to build capacity. The district that wants to build capacity, you know, doesn't have to rely on us for the entire implementation time, the adoption timeframe, whether it's 6 years, 4 years, whatever it may be. But we also have the ability and capability to provide it as a service. So while we actually can deliver the training that we outlined in there with or without the coaches, our part of our training plan will actually create capacity with the coaches that you guys bring on to the district. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess the other part of that question would be, have a lot of your districts where you've implemented Savas ended up hiring quote coaches internally? Or if you can answer that.
I'm sorry, Jeff. Mr. Wallace, can you specify coaches exclusive to coaching, not teaching?
Yeah,
Rather
I'm
coaching.
talking about not just your super users per se. I'm talking about two dedicated individuals, for example, on site that are an additional cost that are no longer in the classroom dedicated to this. And I'm trying to ascertain whether that your program somewhat requires that. I understand it doesn't require that, but that would be what is needed to effectively implement your programs. Does that make sense?
Can I just add a piece before they answer? Because I do want to let them answer and share that point. It was not a requirement from them that we have the two coaches. We saw it as a value add and a smart way to use our ESSER dollars towards learning loss. So we came forward with this is the plan that we are hoping to use going forward. Can you customize professional development around that?
And I'm trying to understand what is the need related to that. I understand that's your goal and that's your desire. My question is, how do the programs fit into that desire?
Understood.
So I'll go back and say it's not required for us that, you know, some districts do and some districts don't. I think you guys were in Ben Salem. I think they have dedicated coaches or a dedicated coach that actually supports the implementation. Some districts do not do that, and they just rely on our job embedded services and implementation services to help support them through their adoption.
And you find that is successful typically, that approach?
I think it is successful.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm sorry, I had to step out just to speak to some of the students there, but I just want to clarify the coaches who would be assigned to the district from Savas or Wit and Wisdom. If we were able to do that from the company standpoint, they would be dedicated to us, or at least in this geographic area, to be able to have on call as needed.
We have an education consulting team that and a professional development manager that manages that staff. So we would keep the same consultants that were here.
Correct.
To create consistency in the school district. Yeah.
Same.
Okay.
I missed your response. Did you respond? Is you're required, like, maybe I'm.
It's not required.
But do you feel like it's helpful and needed? To answer the same question?
So most of the time, when we start these implementations, there are coaches that exist already. So, you know, do you have to hire coaches, and will this otherwise not be successful? Probably not, but it's going to help it to be successful a lot quicker and a lot more effectively.
Because I wasn't there for the last part, but with the coaches and being a former classroom teacher, am I going to feel more comfortable going to one of the teachers that have piloted the programs? Or am I going to feel more comfortable? Not that these people, whoever comes from either company, just naturally, who you're going to feel more comfortable with? Someone you know, someone that's experienced it, or someone that has come in from the district and you don't know anything. I think the coaching aspect and having the coaches in there is, regardless of what series we go with, is a very important piece of the things. Would we do that in other professions? When I got hired as a nurse, I was coached. You don't throw people into these professions without doing that.
And thank you for the comments, Mr. Donato, but I think that is definitely an internal discussion that we would have, and that's also a budgetary consideration as well.
Thank you all for coming and all of the information. Actually, even though I spent some time on this, I've learned some new things tonight, and I appreciate that. One question that I did have, and I lost it. We have students, as many districts do, who I don't know what the current percentage is, who English is their second language, and they require additional support. And I know on Wit and Wisdom's website, there's I haven't looked at it, but that kind of support is offered. Do you have the same thing? The multicultural, yeah.
So both of these programs are really intended to be tier one instruction and am I told? And so if an English language learner it's determined that they need tier two or tier three intervention, which many will, it's not going to come from this program. However, there are a lot of supports for the classroom teacher and or somebody who might work with a student who's getting some support to give them the same kind of access, primarily to the knowledge build.
So you're talking about whatever language support, which would also include resources that would support the core books, which is what we do in our middle schools. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So if I could just follow up on that, it is a little different in my view. All of that kind of support for multilingual learners is included in my view. The kind of support that he was just talking about built into the lessons, every single lesson plan has 4 different levels of multilingual learner support built into that lesson. But in addition to that, there is a tier 2 component in my view. So that tier 2 component is going to provide resources for teachers in the classroom to use, or for additional personnel who might be working with multilingual learners. And there's one other resource as well. It's called the Language Awareness Handbook. And that Language Awareness Handbook was developed by our multilingual learner author, Jim Cummins. He's been doing research for probably decades now about the kind of support that our English language learners need. For every single lesson in the MyView Teacher's Manual, there is an accompanying lesson for multilingual learners. So all students continue to have access to complex text and those the rigorous instruction that we're working on, but the strategies and the scaffolds that make them be successful. That's the first part of the Language Awareness Handbook. Second part of the Language Awareness Handbook focuses on vocabulary, language and conventions or grammar, different supports for students like sentence starters, sentence frames, multi levels of graphic organizers that really help students organize that language. For every one of our content readers digitally, there is a multilingual learner video online inside that content reader that's designed to build background knowledge, talk about assisting with vocabulary and grammar and conventions as well.
And just a kind of a basic question, I've read most of the books with Wit and Wisdom. I've looked at the workbooks. So these students get the same book. Like if it's a English language learner would get the same workbook as your English speaking student would.
Yes, for core instruction, they would have that exact same book. What the teachers would have are the supports and the additional lesson plans to help students access that complex text, build their vocabulary and build that content knowledge that turns into that background knowledge.
So both of you use the same core books. You don't have an additional book that is similar, to whatever the story is or the book, the topic is.
So some of the core texts are available in, let's say, Spanish as well. So I have had some districts that will order additional copies of that book for certain lessons for accessibility purposes for a student where English is a second language, depending on where they are.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I mean, it's an important, we've got to learn English.
Yep.
And learn it well as our other students do. And reading, all of the associated skills. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Keener. No, I was just going to ask if anybody else had any comments or questions. So it's to you.
Yeah, I have a question actually for both companies. And I appreciate if you could each respond in turn. Since the pilot programs have launched, we as a board, the administration, have heard from a number of community members who have expressed concern about some of the content in each of the curricula. And I wonder what you would say to members of the Hempfield community who might have concerns with the appropriateness of the content in each of your respective curricula.
I can go first if you want me to go first. All of the content that is in my view is reflective of the cultural demographics of the United States. We have heard zero negative feedback about inappropriateness of our texts. As a matter of fact, the number one piece of feedback that I hear from teachers and mostly from students is that they love what they're reading. And if students love what they're reading, they're more engaged, and that is more than half of our battle.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So pretty much the same thing, and then with some of the specific things that Mr. Hoffman pointed out in the presentation earlier, we have offered alternative lessons texts so that if there is a preponderance of parents, let's say, that say, don't want my child to learn about a starfish in a seahorse, excuse me. You can remove those couple of lessons or that text and insert another and not lose the integrity of the integrated approach to the ELA skills, let's say. And now you might be not creating the same background knowledge or content knowledge, but you would insert something else like another animal, something interesting about that. So we have developed for those things that have surfaced, those couple of items that have surfaced as the most, the word I'm looking for, the most reported issues, alternative texts and alternative portions of lessons.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just have one real quick thing, hopefully it'll be quick. Both these have yearly requirements, right, for cost. So I understand the Sava, you have printed materials for it. With the Wit and Wisdom, we're not getting printed materials. So what does that additional cost per year cover? Website access, or both of you, like website access, updated material, like what does that additional cost cover? Or is that just a license fee?
So the only thing you're going to replace, so the cost that you have is the full cost for 6 years. What we're going to do annually is send you new student logbooks because their students are they're writing in them. And part of that 6-year cost is activation of the digital licenses and all for the full tenure of the contract. So
I think the same, we did a 6-year subscription for the most part. I think the way that Dr. Danbridge, based on the funding sources, have actually allocated that way. The only reoccurring cost per se, or what there really shouldn't be any, it's just that we are shipping out every year student interactives K through 6, along with the digital license that's renewing. So those are the two things that you're actually going to get every year, along with any professional development that may carry into the out years. All the other stuff is an upfront. All the teacher materials, classroom materials are all upfront first year.
Any other board members with any questions or concerns?
I can just add one piece here at the end.
Yes,
Again,
sir.
just thanking both companies, our teachers, administrators for being here to be able to talk about the experiences from the pilot. Andy, I'm going to go back to something you said at the very beginning. ELA pilots are very difficult. It's not like a math pilot, science, social studies. ELA is so huge and so vast, and there's so many components to it that we need to look at. So again, I thank you for that time tonight. Board members, you will see on the agenda further down in the meeting when we get there. We carried forward the recommendation that was made. However, if there is not support for that, we are asking to be able to continue and potentially expand the pilot, to be able to work with teachers, track the students, get more data, and bring that forward. and continue working with the companies. I think one of the pieces that is important and just hearing it tonight again, when you look at the vast amount of materials within the programs, it's important to be able to have that time to really look and see. And I appreciate the time that everyone has put into this. It is a huge investment, and it's important for us to make sure that we're making the right decision. And so if more time is needed, I'd rather take that time, if that is the will of the board, to be able to keep working at this. But that's why you'll see the two different items, 13A and 13B on the agenda. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for having us tonight. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to take a 10-minute recess and we'll come back here at like 9:43. Thank you. Listen to it all.
Yeah.
Okay, we're back in order.
Mr. Barr, if I can just share something real quick. Ladies and gentlemen who are here tonight, it's brought to our attention that people are passing around flyers. That should not be happening in this meeting. That's the same as holding up posters or having all of that. So if you are, I'm asking you to please stop so that we can continue with our meeting, because if that does continue, we will have to stop until this is completed. So please refrain from passing out flyers, holding up banners, all that stuff. That's just not appropriate in a public meeting. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I missed.
People are passing around flyers,
Okay, all right.
post, all that stuff. Yeah.
Okay, before we move on to public comment portion of tonight's meeting, and Mr. Bormersky has a few words after that, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the policies that the board will be considering this evening. Over the past several months, the board has heard from many members of the Hempfield community who have shared sincere and deeply held beliefs about materials in our libraries and classrooms. Some have expressed concern about exposing our students to inappropriate and overly sexualized materials, while others have expressed support for robust intellectual inquiry and freedom of expression. While it is sometimes difficult to reconcile these viewpoints, the board has debated in good faith over the course of several the board has debated in good faith over the course of several public meetings and reached an agreement. The board believes that the language we're voting on tonight strikes an appropriate balance between these important objectives. In crafting this language, we have been mindful of our duty to our students, faculty, and the Hempfield community, as well as our legal obligations. We appreciate the time that the faculty, administration, and student leadership has devoted to the policy development process, and we are grateful for the robust community engagement that is central to our democracy. Mr. Maversky.
Thank you. I just want to address a few things. I've received questions over the last few weeks around board policies, kind of the development of, and I just want to be able to address that quickly, as well as one other piece here. I think it's important for everyone to know, at least, from what I see, I've been in the district now since 2015. And I can say with certainty that everyone on this board, our administrators, our teachers, staff, and our community wants nothing but the best for our students in this district. Sometimes what we want is similar. Sometimes what we want differs. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, it's coming from a good place. And I think from an administrative standpoint, we are continuously working on policies. We are being made aware of changes that the state is coming out with regards to expectations for school districts. When we're working on policies, we have administrators that work on them. Sometimes we work in groups or teams. We involve others in the district. We involve different groups. We work with our solicitor. There are times that we get information from other organizations or other legal experts, and we bring all that information back and we discuss it publicly with the board at our policy committee meetings. There are times when we make recommendations and they're not accepted. And there are times when board members ask questions or say, we'd like to see language around this, or have we thought about this? And then we go back and we keep working on it and we ask questions, we dig deeper. Sometimes we have to spend some time researching and we go back for legal opinions. And I think all of this shows kind of that the importance. And I think what you just witnessed since the start of the meeting is the intentionality and the amount of time that we take, and we take it seriously when we're looking at making those decisions that will have impacts across the district. And so I know it's our responsibility, and people think that, but I do want people to understand that one of the board's responsibilities is to set policy. It's not the administrator's job to set the policy. Our job is to then take that policy, develop regulations, and figure out how we communicate that, implement it, and hold people accountable to those policies. But I think it's important that we remember at the end of the day, we're all coming from a good place. We want what's best for our kids, and that difference is okay, but we have to just do it in a respectful manner. So I know we're coming up to public comment, and I'm very proud. I see what's happening across the county and across the country with regards to what's happening in school districts. Our board meetings are not looking like what we're seeing on the news and other places. And I thank all of you for that. And I know that that will continue from the standpoint of you want the best, we all want the best. So we're going to do this in a respectful manner as we move forward. And it's one of the things that I really appreciate about our district and the community. And I just want to acknowledge that and just address a few things around policies. Let's go back to Mr. Bard.
Thank you, Mr. Mamersky. Provides a time of public comment for the residents and taxpayers to bring their thoughts to the board, but it's not a time to exchange between the board, administration, and the speaker. We ask that all the speakers refrain from identifying specific students, staff, or community members by name. Residents and taxpayers who are interested in making public comment must complete the electronic registration form prior to 3 p.m. the day of the meeting. Tonight, we have 28 individuals that are signed up to participate in public comment. With our 5-minute allotment for each speaker, comment will exceed 2 hours this evening. And the board must fulfill its obligation to do business on behalf of the school district. While we anticipate full cooperation from all members of the community this evening, due to the volume of participants, each member of the community is set to speak must keep to the topic in which they have previously signed up for prior to this evening's meeting, consistent with the regulations of policy 903. In the event that any of the comments by members of the public deviate from what is previously signed up for, you will be directed to discontinue from further comment. We thank you for your anticipated cooperation so as to assure that we conduct our business this evening in an orderly and efficient fashion.
Mr. Bard, we had a request that if there were students who signed up to speak, given the time, that if the community would be willing to let them speak first, but that would mean that everyone who signed up would have to be okay with that. Okay, I'll take that as a complete yes. So if we have any students who signed up and that everything has been posted of the 28 individuals, will the students please come up to the podium?
One last thing before we move on to that. In this evening's meeting, this time will be up on the board. So the speaker can see the time and knows how much time they have left rather than us flashing placards for you to look at. Mr. Graham, were the students just line up or is Mr. Graham still getting
We'll have
that?
students come up first.
Yeah. So unlike normally, if you just could introduce yourself so we can mark you off on the list before we get back to the normal order.
My name is Elizabeth Sheeler. I believe I was marked as number 7.
Yep.
To the board, thank you for your time and your hard work. It's greatly appreciated. My name is Elizabeth Sheeler. I'm currently a junior at Hempfield High School. I partake in many of the school's organizations, including Anchor Club, National Honor Society, Chinese Club, Debate Club, GSA, and Renaissance
Can
Club.
you move closer to the mic?
Yes, sorry. Should I?
Bend the mic a little more towards you.
There, okay. I am also the school district's first female Eagle Scout. I'm aware that the school board has been facing a lot of pressure to create policies that would lead to banning books from our school libraries. And to say that I'm appalled at this possibility is an understatement. I understand why some people want these books to be banned. Their contents bring up discussions that many see as uncomfortable. But for many of these books, banning them because they make people uncomfortable is completely missing the point. For many of these books, such as The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe, and Speak by Lori Halls Anderson, bringing up those uncomfortable discussions is the entire point. The Hate You Give is meant to start uncomfortable conversations about racism and police brutality. Genderqueer is meant to start uncomfortable conversations about how sexual and gender identity can affect an individual. Speak is meant to start uncomfortable conversations about the importance of consent and how society views that importance. These discussions may be uncomfortable, but having them is vital for a student's health and safety. Whether we're willing to acknowledge it or not, racism and police brutality, sexual and gender identity, and consensual sex and how we view it as a society affects us all. They affect students who need to know that they aren't alone. They are conversations that we need to have, both as a society and with our kids. I understand that the issue that many parents have with these books being in our schools is that they want to have these conversations with their kids before they start learning about them in school. That is 100% reasonable. What isn't reasonable is trying to stop these discussions from happening in the controlled environments of our schools at all. If you limit a child's access to resources about these topics in schools, you won't actually prevent them from learning about it, but will rather force them to get their information from unsafe and unreliable sources, most likely found on the internet, and we all know how bad that misinformation can get. So parents, if you really want to make sure that you have conversations with your children about things like racism, sexuality, and consent before someone else does, rather than working to take away those resources from everyone, have that conversation with your kid first. And to the board, some parents won't have those deeply important conversations. They just won't. These students need a safe place to learn about themselves, their past, and their future, and there's no safer place than their school library. I understand that you've made a commitment to avoid book bans. I urge you to please honor this commitment. These resources, these books, they need to stay. Thank you.
Any other students?
All right. In that case, we'll be resuming the normal order. Our first speaker is Stacy Hernandez, who will be followed by Richard Boyer.
Good evening. I want to thank the board members for stepping up and volunteering your time, help this district and our kids.
Stop that time, Mr. Graham.
Put that down. You can't have that up. It's only speaking time.
I was told that
Just one second.
it's because of something I'm speaking about that I am holding it to show you guys. Just if I was holding a book up here to you or whatever, that's exactly what it is. It's just a bigger version.
1 second, I'd just like to comment so everybody in the audience is aware. Previous meetings, several of them, when people came up to give their speaking part, brought up placards to describe their actual content. That is different than holding signs up in the audience. So we're going to stay consistent with what we've been doing in the past. I apologize for interrupting you.
Should I start over?
Can you start the time back at 5?
All right. Good evening. I want to thank the board members for stepping up and volunteering your time to help this district and our kids. I am a single mom with 3 kids in this school district. I have been speaking at the board meeting since 2020. And yes, I spoke about many subjects, but one continuing subject has been the age appropriateness of books in our school districts, like when I had read the book Push to you all. I have a question for everybody in this room and on Zoom. By law, is a minor allowed to buy a pornographic book like Playboy? Is a kid allowed in an R-rated movie without consent of from a parent? When we had the video stores where kids allowed in the X-rated areas, are they allowed to watch that kind of stuff on TV without entering an age of 18 or above? The answer is no. If a kid can do these things, why can they read all about this in our schools? It's not about taking everybody's rights away. As parents, we have the right to raise our children to the way we want to be contributing members in the society and upstanding morals and convictions. When a kid under the age of 18 does something wrong, the parent usually ends up getting fined or put in jail or some other kind of consequence because of something their child did. Why? Because it's determined that under the age of 18, that children are still learning right from wrong and are incapable of processing consequences and long-term effects. That's why children cannot vote under the age of 18, smoke, join the military, carry firearm, or look at sexually explicit material. Children see something interesting and they go right at it and learn more, not knowing if it's good or bad for them. It is the adult that is supposed to determine and show the kids that what is good. As our parents used to say, garbage in, garbage out. If you haven't seen down in Texas recently, a 6-year-old little girl in a classroom with a teacher in the classroom was forced under a desk by other 6-year-olds that made her perform sexual acts to them, while one of the kids recorded this on their school iPad and thought nothing of it. Kids model behaviors that they see or read about. Well, I know many of you are thinking that we're We are here to ban books from the library. This has nothing to do with banning anything but usage of age-appropriate materials in our schools. I'm not just talking about the library, I'm talking about in the classrooms. My kids have brought home good amounts of assignments that have been inappropriate, including the teddy bear porn that we all know about. Questions on science tests that talk about a girl being raped, and you need to figure out the genetics of the two men using the Punnett squares to decide which one did it. There's also been books that I didn't know about until my kids had told me about them after the fact. The most recent one was this semester, my kid in high school classes, and where they were reading Speak by Laurie House Anderson. This book talks about a girl being raped by a football player and how she has a hard time in school, and even starts cutting and contains sexual activities, rape, sexual assault, and battery, and profanity. I didn't know this was even a book until I had actually looked at my son's assignments and was very surprised. No wonder he was coming home from school and going straight to bed and acting very depressed. He wouldn't complete the assignments, and even when I had told him many, many times. He even said he didn't want to go to school anymore, so what's the point? We don't learn. The teacher, whom I really actually do like, had to put out disclaimers about what each of the chapters were about before she read them. Why would we need to have books in our schools that have to have a disclaimer or a counselor present when reading? The first assignment was definitions that they had to look up, and the words were obscene, shocking, offensive, extremely unfair, immoral, unpleasant, abstinence, indoctrination, interrogation, and many more. The other assignments were all about trying to see how the girl felt while she was being raped, and why she tried cutting herself. Why do our literature books have to be all about the emotions, sex, drugs, depression, cutting, all that nowadays? This is why I keep saying, when we get back to the basics, you don't need all that extra emotional stuff in an already emotional age group. When the class moved on to Shakespeare, my son's attitude brightened up, and he got straight A's on every single assignment from there on out. This book should never have been in a reading assignment for that class. It is not age appropriate. We wonder why there is more emotional problems and suicides, fights in schools, and bad behavior. The books that they read do affect how a child acts, and I am strongly asking that we teach our children with age-appropriate material and have age-appropriate books in the library. Let's do better and make the kids in this district flourish. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Richard Boyer, who will be followed by Scott Wigglesworth.
My message this evening is simple. We must advocate for responsible content management. The school district administration has a legal obligation to provide a safe and appropriate learning environment for students. This includes protecting them from material that is considered to be inappropriate for their age and maturity level. The school board has a legitimate responsibility in protecting children from exposure to material that is not suitable for education. The removal of obscene or sexually graphic content is not book banning or a violation of free speech. It is simply responsible content management, and it does not open the door to the right wing, as one particular board member claimed. The refinement of curriculum has absolutely nothing to do with politics. The right of free speech is not absolute. The Supreme Court has established that certain types of speech, such as obscenity and child pornography, are not protected by the First Amendment. Miller v. California, 1973, New York v. Ferber, 1982, just to name a few. It's not a matter of political ideology, but a legal responsibility of school districts to ensure that the materials provided to students is age appropriate and has educational value. The board is not crafting policy because they dislike the ideas contained in the books or materials. It's because they are obscene, contain graphic sexual content, and not age appropriate. They have no educational value, and they all lack literary merit. There are several nonpartisan peer-reviewed studies that's demonstrated the harmful effects of exposure to sexually explicit content to minors. In fact, a report from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services highlights the risks of sexual content exposure for adolescents. We know the digital age has increased exposure of harmful content to children, and that responsibility falls onto the parent. Both parents and the school district must take steps to ensure that they're able to grow and develop in a safe and healthy environment. They are the most vulnerable members of our society. Now, it comes as no surprise that there's some who equate responsible content management with censorship. The claim that removing inappropriate material is book banning is a logical fallacy held strongly by activists that are deeply rooted in identity politics. Some of these activists continuously demonstrate the lack of respect for free speech and disregard the principles of freedom and democracy. They've shown a willingness to go to great lengths to cancel or discredit those who hold different views. Their recent and past actions of contacting employers to attack people's livelihood and professional careers, they were here earlier, to make false allegations against sitting board members, including slanderous statements about very respectable local establishments, and even making false child abuse claims against a resident in which Child Protective Services.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Mr. Grimm, can you stop the time? Mr. Boyer, I apologize to interrupt you. Your comments were supposed to be towards poly support. I appreciate your compassion, but please stay to that, okay?
Understood, understood.
Thank you.
Bottom line up front, there needs to be a change of language in the policy. It is for the betterment of the children. Some of the content, there's evidence out there that proves that it does cause harm. And again, just to reiterate, free speech is not absolute. Thank you.
Scott Wigglesworth will be followed by Tamitha Mitchell.
Well, I want to thank you. You guys are in for a long night. And I have to say, after sitting here for the last 3 hours and 10 minutes, I have an even greater appreciation of your commitment and service to this community. I'd like to start and talk about what the policy that you're debating is not. It is not a ban on books. A ban would mean specific books or materials would not be allowed on school property. This is not that. An example of a ban would be drugs or alcohol. There's not one book, one website, or one source material mentioned in this policy. Right now, today's students are allowed, and they do, bring books to school that are not made available in the library. And that will continue after this policy is passed, if it is indeed passed. So the question is, if this policy does not ban books, what does it do, and why is it needed? In a nutshell, this policy establishes criteria in regards to materials the school district will provide and make available to students. This policy ensures that the best materials possible are being utilized for the education of our students. It ensures that the materials used are age appropriate. It establishes a review of materials to ensure that they're not only relevant to the mission of education, but they're also actually being used. What a novel concept. It defines sexually explicit material, and it recognizes that such material has no legitimate educational purposes, should not be provided to students by the school. It creates a method